This morning, some breaking news in the last half an hour. Israel's defence minister has said his country has attacked Iran and has declared a state of emergency. Let's pick up with our Middle East correspondent, Adam Parsons, who's in Jerusalem for us this morning. So some striking news this morning, Adam.
Yeah, very significant. This operation, I'm told, is called the Shield of Judah, which effectively means the shield of the Jews. It has been launched by the Israeli military this morning. I understand there were 2 waves of attack on Iran. It is ongoing. So let's go through what we know and what we're not sure about. What we are not sure about, although, as you said, the Associated Press Agency has reported, we're not sure about the level of US support for this. AP is saying the US is participating. We don't know what that means, whether that means logistical support, whether that means active military participation. Certainly, we have seen refueling planes, which we understand are American, have been taking off from Ben Gurion Airport, reports of that. We know that talks between the US and Iran were supposed to continue next week about nuclear enrichment. We also know that Israel considered that Iran's build-up of ballistic missiles to be far, far more important, and that did not appear to be an American priority. What appears clear is that the focus of these attacks has been on Tehran, the Iranian capital, but I'm now receiving messages suggesting that other places have been attacked as well. Iranian airspace has been closed. I'm told that Iraqi airspace has also been closed. And notably, in terms of what might have been the motivation for this morning, Mossad, the Israeli secret agency, has set up a Telegram channel, a Persian Telegram channel, that is asking Iranians to rise up against their regime and is asking them to send messages and images of their their so-called resistance. So also in terms of what is going on in Iran at the moment, you will of course remember those protests that we have seen recently in which so many people were killed. Those protests were initially sparked by economic chaos in the country, and I'm being told that the dollar has now, or the toman, the Iranian currency, is effectively in a form of free fall and has now reached 175,000 to the dollar. That is a huge increase. The Telegram channel of the IRGC, the Republican Guard, has just put out a statement saying that a number of its own personnel have been killed and wounded. So Iran is now saying that people have been killed and wounded by these Israeli strikes against Iran, focusing on Tehran. Sources here, the Times of Israel, is just at this moment saying that the United States was involved militarily in carrying out the strikes this morning. Explosions, as we know, have been seen there. The fundamental question about whether or not the US was involved in this, the Times of Israel is saying that the US was involved. In terms of what is happening on the ground here, Jerusalem, Israel at the moment is peaceful, but an air siren was sounded at around 8 o'clock this morning as what was considered a preemptive warning to Israeli citizens that they could be attacked, and a form of sort of light touch lockdown, I suppose you might call it, has been put in place with Israelis told not to go out other than for essential reasons.
And Adam, I should just cut in here at this point. We've been talking all morning about whether or not the level of involvement by the US. The Reuters news agency is now quoting a US official as saying that they have confirmed that US strikes on Iran are underway. US strikes on Iran are underway. So they're not named, this official. It's just the Reuters news agency saying that at present. But they are saying a US official has confirmed that US strikes on Iran are underway.
Well, that is profoundly important for our understanding of what is happening now. That clearly then points to a joint operation by the United States and Israel. As Michael Clark was saying to you, this is a similar pattern to back in June when the US attacked Iran and Israel right in the middle of what were considered to be negotiations. They were underway just as they are in Geneva at the moment, and then the attack happened, which of course ended up with the US launching those enormous bombs at Iran's nuclear facilities. The build-up this time has been different. There is a massive American military presence in this region, the biggest since the run-up to the Iraq War more than 20 years ago. There are two aircraft carriers, the Abraham Lincoln, the Gerald R. Ford, which are in the region. The Gerald R. Ford particularly, well, in fact, and the Lincoln, both capable of firing missiles deep into Iran at missile facilities that are hard to reach with conventional planes. Just receiving a message here that according to sources in Iran, confirmed targets, and this is not corroborated by us, include the Iranian Ministry of Intelligence, the Ministry of Defense, the Office of Ayatollah Khamenei, and the Iranian Atomic Energy Agency. We will await corroboration of that. But the fact this is a joint operation between Israel and America is something of a game changer. The American embassy here in Jerusalem did say that staff who wanted to leave should leave yesterday. But I have to say that statement at the time was not an evacuation. It didn't come with huge urgency. The UK embassy in Tel Aviv did move staff to an unknown location away from the embassy, presumably because they considered the UK embassy to be a potential target. But in the minds of many people, and this attack will be a surprise. And as I've said before, it's happening on the morning of Shabbat, when Israel is normally a very quiet, and bear in mind this is normally quite a frenetic city and nation. Shabbat is normally the morning for reflection, for peace and quiet. But as we speak at the moment, Israel and the United States are involved in that military attack on Iran.
Adam, for the moment, thanks very much indeed. Let's bring in our military analyst, Sean Bell, now. Morning to you, Sean. Information coming in all the time and reports coming in all the time. What have you made of what we've learnt so far?
Yeah, good morning to you. I mean, inevitably with these times, it's quite difficult with the information coming in. You're hearing a lot about attacks in Tehran, which is understandable. There's media there, there's people there, there's phones there. As a military operation, generally, you'd be doing what they did last year, which is roll back the air defense systems because you want to be able to operate your fighter jets with impunity over Iran. So I wouldn't be at all surprised if they're also targeting some of the military bases around Iran and the air defense systems, which are often located pretty remotely, and therefore it's not likely you get pictures of those straight away. I think the other thing that's captured my thoughts is that, as you were alluding to earlier with Adam, you know, that we are middle of the way through talks here. One of the questions was always, does President Trump actually believe that Iran is just trying to string him along? And if it's true that they're still planning another round of talks on Thursday in Geneva, this is a classic play by the American military might to say, look, we're not going to be strung along here. You either are serious about talks or not. And I think we'll find out about that as the day goes on, because another thing that struck me is obviously the pictures you're showing are all in daylight at the moment. And of course, part of this is that as a military guy, you generally do these operations at 2 or 3 in the morning, and they'd all be over by dawn. So whether or not part of this is a very public gesture to tell the Iranian leadership, hitting their Ministry of Defence, hitting the offices of the Ayatollah and the nuclear facility, the offices of the nuclear facility. All of that is not really on my priority list if I was a military advisor to the Americans or the Israelis. So this looks, at the moment, the early days, much more like a gesture and a statement of intent by the Americans in advance of the next round of talks.
Well, yes, and we still don't have a clear picture of the level of participation or coordination by the Americans, do we? At the moment, we're getting officials being quoted by news agencies and no formal confirmation of the level of involvement. But what are the risks here of a retaliatory attack? I mean, Israel has, their defence minister has confirmed that they have attacked. There are air raid sirens going off in major cities in Israel. What could Iran do next?
Well, yeah, this is the interesting factor, I think, and it will depend on how effective this first range of strikes are, because Iran will be now trying to work out if it does a major attack onto Israel or wider. Of course, it'll unleash the gods of war. And the last thing Iran wants is to actually have America and Israel conducting a full-scale campaign, because the sort of options that Iran has available, they may not be a military superpower like America, but the one thing they have a lot of is ballistic missiles. And as we saw last year, waves upon waves of those missiles, one might not get through, 10 might not get through, but if you launch 100 or 500, just a quantity has a quality all of its own. And there's not only attacking Israel, but also attacking US military facilities, LUD. There's a lot of military bases in the region, and I think they could do that. The other couple of things that they could do is they did a live firing exercise on the Straits of Hormuz, shutting that down only the other day. There's a lot of reports of them doing more of that or mining those straits. Why is that important to us? Well, about 20% of global oil goes through that straits, and that would immediately cause hassle on the oil markets. And the final thing will be interesting. I'm not sure if you've got a picture of it, but the Shahid Bagheera, which is a relatively new drone ship which the Iranians have commissioned, is now in service. And that's been seen sort of operating close-ish to the aircraft carriers. And once again, it can launch quite a lot of potent drones. Again, the Americans have got a very, very effective close-in protection in these carriers. But once you start flooding that defense with 20, 30, 50 drones at a time, it might be that the Americans would start to feel a little vulnerable. Probably wouldn't sink the carrier, but my goodness, would it be a statement of intent? So there's quite a lot of stuff that Iran could do, but I'd imagine at the moment, their first instinct will be to try and avoid this escalating.
And we were talking about how Israel has put the country into a state of emergency following this strike on Iran. We've actually got some pictures of some of the major cities, Haifa and Tel Aviv, where, as you can hear, sirens have been going off.
I think you're going to see a bit of this, because inevitably Israel will expect, they have to plan for the worst and hope for the best. They will be wanting to make sure that they have cleared. And one of the most these scenarios, when I was in the military, you war game them. In other words, you say, right, if we do this, what could Iran do? And some of those are, as we've just said, they might be reluctant to go to war with America. But the most dangerous option that Iran could do is to go, right, you've been preemptive. We're now going to throw everything at Israel. We're going to throw 100 ballistic missiles at Israel. Some will get through, and because otherwise we're lost. So let's fire everything in one go. Unlikely, but it is possible, and therefore Israel has to prepare for that eventuality.
If I can also, we're getting word in on the wires, quoting Iranian state media, talking about where some of the explosions have been heard. And I don't know if these sites will prompt a reaction in you if you know what's in them. There's a northwestern Iranian city of Tabriz, according to the IRNA. The explosions have been heard there, for example. We also heard earlier from the Fars news agency, again picked up by Reuters, that explosions were heard in Isfahan, Qom, Karaj and Kermanshah. And I wonder if you would know why particularly strikes might be focused on those locations.
Well, you're catching me fairly in the morning, and the Iranian geography is not my master's. Yeah, so Isfahan was one of the sites where the the uranium enrichment facilities were placed. There's quite a lot of activity there. And as we open my pitch here, I think it's going to be interesting. We are obviously focused on the explosions in the major city, but I would be very surprised if this isn't being matched by surgical strikes on a whole number of different targets. Initially, as a military guy, you want to be able to operate your F-22s, you talked about them earlier, your air power over Iran, but they're vulnerable to the air defense systems. So the first thing you do is to roll back the Iranian air defense systems, which are normally quite remote. You might not hear about the explosions. Then you'd have a master target list, which will have been developed by the Americans and the Israelis, built on intelligence. And then you'd start to prosecute those. I think what's interesting for me is there's still a lot of discussion about what is the American objective here. It's all very well peppering Iran with a few explosions, but is it to actually destroy their uranium enrichment to set back any program? Well, I understood they'd done that last year. So what else are they planning to do? Is it about destroying Iran's ability to launch and produce ballistic missiles? That's a very different one. Is it about regime change? And of course, if it is, first of all, we don't have a very great history in the West about doing that, whether it's Libya or Iraq. And also, you have to remember that we think America's a superpower, it's got lots of weapons, but the harsh reality is if you're going to conduct a lengthy campaign into Iran, you would use more weapons than probably are available at the moment. America's been helping support Western efforts in Ukraine. They've also want to keep some weapons aside for if there was any conflict with China. So at the moment, it's very possible that the cupboards aren't bare, but they are struggling. So I'd be quite surprised as a military guy if they've got enough weapons to do a sustained long-term campaign. So some of this is, what are their priorities? What is the American agenda here? And it may well be, particularly with the Trump's midterms due shortly, that an apparently Israeli-led, US-supported surgical strike, simply demonstrating intent, but with no intention to actually go to war, might be the outcome that suits America, particularly the president at this time.
Sean, we'll come back to you shortly, but I do want to bring in our Security and Defence Editor, Deborah Haynes, who can join us now. So, Deborah, Israel's Defence Minister confirming that Israel has attacked Iran and declared a state of emergency. And we're getting a lot of reports suggesting US involvement of some sorts, quoting anonymous officials. What do you make of it?
I mean, I think it would be inconceivable, given the build-up over the last few weeks and all of the rhetoric from the American side, that this operation would not be happening without significant American involvement. And yes, the Israelis might have been first out the block with admitting that they were, or acknowledging that they are involved, but clearly, from all the reporting that's coming out, there is a significant American involvement too, which would signal that Donald Trump, he said yesterday, didn't he, that he hadn't made a decision about what to do when it comes to Iran. That decision must have been made after he made those words. And everybody was second guessing. The anticipation and all of the warnings and the indicators that an American strike was imminent were everywhere and have been for a few days now. The only unknown was what Donald Trump was thinking and what he was going to decide. And clearly he's weighed up the options and, if all these reportings are confirmed, decided that that military action is the only way to achieve the objectives that he said. But as Sean was saying, the objectives are pretty unclear, and this is very high risk. And the Iranians will also have been preparing and wargaming an outcome where America and Israel launch attacks on them. And clearly, from the reporting that you're getting, this doesn't seem to be particularly limited. There's multiple sites reportedly being hit. It does seem they're going after missile and nuclear strikes, if those names of locations that you just mentioned are correct. And if that is the case, it's going to have to be different from June, when the last time that America struck Iran, which was a very rapid and surgical operation. This time around, if the objectives are more broad in terms of changing the leadership, because clearly that is who the Americans have been, most criticising and demanding that they alter their course when it comes to their nuclear ambitions, then the potential is obviously there for this to be a much bigger operation. And also, crucially, the firepower, the American firepower in the region. Yes, of course, it's not finite, but it is significant.
And in fact, exactly corresponding to what you've just been saying, we've just had Reuters report an Iranian official telling them that Tehran is preparing for retaliation, and they go on to say the response will be crushing.
I think that is absolutely the thing to look for now. Of course, Iran is going to say that the response is going to be overwhelming. They have to say that. The key indicator will be exactly how far they go and how far they can go, because their military has been under significant attack in the different waves of attacks. That obviously you've had the very overt operations that the Americans previously conducted, and in the run-up to that as well, the Israelis have launched a number of raids into Iran, degrading their air defense systems and going after their ability to launch ballistic missiles. But we do know, of course, that Iran has a significant stockpile of ballistic and cruise missiles and drones. It has the ability to cause significant harm, and the key will be to what extent the regime sees this as existential, and therefore it goes all out in terms of its response. To what extent, if that is the case, it's able to do that in terms of its stockpiles and its ability to attack, given the operations that have already been conducted against it, and then how well the Americans and the Israelis are going to be able to defend against that. And of course, it's not just Israel and the US that are prepared for these anticipated Iranian counterattacks. For example, the UK has assets, of course, within range and in the region. We know that the British military, they forward deployed F-35 warplanes, which are our most advanced fighter jets, to the RAF base in Cyprus. There have also been Typhoon jets deployed to Qatar, again in more of a we've been told, a defensive role for now. But if Iran is going to counterattack and is going to not just go after the US and Israeli targets, but target wider allies in the region, then clearly the UK could well be drawn into this.
And I noticed that Iraq has now closed its airspace. A number of countries neighbouring this region doing the same, Deborah. And perhaps it's a naive question, but where does this leave diplomacy? I mean, we've just had talks in Geneva. The Iranians and the Omanis, who are trying to negotiate between the US and Iran, made some quite positive noises after the talks there. They were intended to be more talks happening next week. Is diplomacy over after a strike like this?
I mean, in a war situation, which this obviously has now escalated to, then clearly diplomacy didn't work. I mean, that's just to state the obvious. But war ends through diplomacy, and so there will clearly be those that absolutely urgently see the need for talks in order to try try to diffuse and de-escalate. But while things are very hot, then clearly diplomacy is not going to be at the forefront of people's minds right now. But I think the fact that the Americans reportedly, and then obviously the Israelis as well, decided to take this, and Israel described it as preemptive action, it signals that, and obviously, and Donald Trump did say that as well, didn't he, that he wasn't happy with the way that the talks had been going. And yes, while they had set further talks to happen in the coming week, he'd taken the decision that it wasn't moving fast enough, or that the Iranians weren't acting in good faith, or weren't serious in their in whatever offer they were making to try to meet the American demands over their nuclear ambitions, that wasn't sufficient. And so clearly he's deciding to use the military instrument, war, to put pressure on the regime, believing that is the way to achieve, through potential further diplomacy, the objectives that he wants, where it comes to Iran absolutely openly and decisively saying that it will not pursue a nuclear program. And there's also obviously huge concerns about Iran's missile program. The other element that has for a long, long time caused extraordinary alarm and concern amongst the US and its allies has been Iran's wide network of proxy forces, such as Hezbollah, which have, and in Iraq, you mentioned Iraq, but the Iranian-backed militias that have a very strong presence in that country too. But that arm of Iran's ability to cause harm has been significantly eroded and degraded since the October the 7th attacks by Hamas on Israel, when Israel has absolutely and fairly decisively gone after groups such as Hezbollah in terms of degrading their ability to come to Iran's defences at a moment of existential peril like now. So really for Iran, it will be about the capacity of its own military to inflict harm. Clearly, it is known that they have the ability to do that. And then it becomes how well that can be defended against, what damage is inflicted, and how America responds.
Deborah, for the moment, thanks very much indeed. I do want to tell any viewers just joining us that we're bringing you breaking news this morning. Israel has carried out strikes against Iran. Well, Adam Parsons is in Jerusalem for us this morning. Our security and defence editor, who you've just been listening to, Deborah Haynes, is also live with us this morning. Plus, our security and defence analyst, Michael Clark, will be getting all your views and reaction to events throughout this morning, of course. But let me talk to Michael first of all. Israel announced about an hour ago that it had carried out strikes on Iran. What have we gathered so far about where those strikes have hit, and to what extent there's been participation of the US too?
Yeah, big questions. And I mean, certainly they look like quite widespread strikes. As the reports have been coming in, it's clear that first strikes were reported in Tehran, but more around the country since then. So there'll be a range of targets. When in the next few hours, when we see more clearly what the targets are, then I think we can be a bit more informed about what the political objective may be behind it. I think Sean Bell was making the point that the first thing that any targeting would try to do is to achieve what's known as SEAD, S-E-A-D, the suppression of enemy air defence. So taking down the air defences of an adversary is usually the first thing you want to do, so that you can then operate more freely and more safely against whatever the real targets are. And I think we'll see an element of that probably coming into it. Undoubtedly, the United States must have known about this. They must have known about it yesterday. And when we put together all the bits of the jigsaw, I think it's pretty clear that sometime from at least midday yesterday, the United States seemed to be preparing for something. Whether they are participating, we don't know. I mean, there have been a couple of reports from Israel, as I understand it, from AP, the news agency, saying that the United States is participating, but it's not clear what that might mean, whether it's logistics, whether it's refueling or something like that. I don't know. If the US is launching attacks, that would be very, very significant. And I mean, Sean Bell had exactly the same thought that I did. If the Americans have started launching attacks, this is pretty late in the day. I mean, Tehran is 3.5 hours ahead of London. So at the moment, it's just coming up to 11 o'clock. In Tehran. Normally, attacks across a country, you would want to do them during the night when you have easier access, when people aren't up and about, when people are more surprised by it, that they can't react so easily. I mean, leaving it until 10:30 or 11 o'clock in the morning is not an ideal time to launch attacks into a country. So militarily, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense, and we'll see. Final point from me, I guess, is that the Iranians have a clear incentive to retaliate with quite a lot, because the longer they leave it, the more they might lose. The Israeli intelligence on what happens in Iran is very, very good, and the Israelis will have a pretty good idea where the Iranians keep their ballistic missiles. They're believed to have at least 2,000 missiles ready to go, or able to go quite quickly. The Israelis will probably know where those weapons stores are, or most of them. And so there is a clear incentive for Tehran, if it is going to retaliate, and so far it's said it will, which you would expect it to say, but for it to retaliate quite heavily while they still have weapons to do so. Now, the retaliation will not be terribly militarily effective, but the Iranians know all they have to do to make this very, very difficult for Donald Trump is to inflict some losses. If they could bring an aircraft down, if they could affect some of the American ships, if they could launch attacks on American ships and cause damage or casualties, all they have to do is inflict some losses, preferably on the Americans, and they know that that will be difficult for Donald Trump to justify in the United States, because all the indications are that US opinion is very ambiguous about this, that the majority of the US does not think that attacks on Iran are a particularly good idea at the moment, and the MAGA base, most of the MAGA base for Donald Trump, is very nervous about being pulled into a forever war in the Middle East. And so I think the Iranians feel they were calling the American bluff yesterday. They were prepared to call the bluff and say, well, we have a deal on the table. We're prepared to go this far. We're not going to go any further until we negotiate further. And they were frustrating Donald Trump. And in a way, I think they know that they have this sense, if the Americans attack, it will not be cost-free. So they have an incentive to increase the costs for the United States and get a political victory out of that.
Michael, for the moment, thank you. Let's just bring in Adam Parsons. Adam, give us a sense of the context of this. We've heard a lot about tensions between the US and Iran over Iran's nuclear ambitions, but talk to us a little bit more about what Israel's intentions are here and why they've chosen now to go after Iran.
So Israel has been very clear that it is much less worried about Iranian nuclear enrichment and much more worried about Iran building up its battery of ballistic missiles. And it felt that this would be a preemptive strike in order to try to degrade Iran's ability to respond. I think we are about to discover, to be blunt, how much that has worked. I'll tell you that the Iranian news agency Tasnim, which is very close to the regime, has just said Iran is preparing to strike Israel. So we are anticipating that when Iran's response will come, it will be focused upon an attack on Israel. I would imagine that that is very likely to mean, among other places, an attack on Tel Aviv. Israel and Iran, of course, traded missiles back in June of last year. And some interesting parallels, really, is that at that time, negotiations were also going on involving the United States. And that attack happened while negotiations were happening. I'm just going to break away on it because I think I'm just seeing that Donald Trump has apparently put out a statement. You may be in a better position to pick this up in a moment because he's put out a video statement.
Yes, so, certainly. I've got a few.
Holding up my phone in front of the camera. It's not
no, don't worry. I've got some lines from it, Adam. Donald Trump has said a short time ago, US began major combat operations in Iran. Our objective is to defend the American people by eliminating imminent threats from the Iranian regime. A short time ago, US military began major combat operations in Iran, as I was just saying. Sorry, it's coming in different wires here, but essentially Donald Trump going on to say Iran can never have a nuclear weapon. So we'll get that full statement for our viewers. It's coming in snaps at the moment. Adam, but essentially Donald Trump confirming that the US is involved in this operation on Iran.
Yeah, very, very interesting. When the sirens first went off this morning, we weren't sure whether this was simply an Israeli operation or joint one. It's now very clear that it is both. I'm also going to tell you, I'm being told that the Israeli army is deploying its 91st Division along the border with Lebanon and is calling up reserve forces. Now, it is worth saying that that is up in the north of Israel. There is a fear from Israel that Hezbollah, a group supported by Iran, may take this opportunity to attack Israel as part of a concerted, coordinated response. A reminder that Iran is believed to have supported Hezbollah in Lebanon, Hamas, of course, in Gaza, and the Houthis in Yemen, all of whom have attacked Israel over the course of recent years. Of course, Hamas launching the October the 7th massacre. So the Israeli army is strengthening its forces up near the border with Lebanon. That is not a coincidence. But in terms of this attack on Iran, it's very clear that Israel fears that Iran would build up its ballistic missile arsenal and would attack Israel. Now, I think one thing to take into account is that when the two countries traded missiles back in June, at the end of that exchange, there were a lot of people who said, right, well, effectively, you know, Israel has beaten Iran. It has now become apparent that Israel's reserves of air defense missiles, the so-called Iron Dome that defends this country, were beginning to run low. That was a pretty close call, and that is why Israel is so jittery about Iran rearming itself. As my colleagues, including Deborah, have said earlier, it is unthinkable that Israel would have planned this attack without at least the support of the White House. We now know that it is being done in coordination. The attacks have been focused on Tehran originally, certainly on the Ministry of Intelligence, or on the base of Ayatollah Khamenei, but also we understand now other sites around Iran have been attacked. This, on the face of it, is not a sort of preemptive surgical strike that some had indicated was possible. Donald Trump had talked about something that might focus minds at talks. This is now such a big strike. I think it is unthinkable that this is going to be anything other than the precursor for a very significant response from Iran, one would imagine in the coming hours. And a reminder, as colleagues have said, the American military build-up here is enormous. Or two carrier groups, Abraham Lincoln and Gerald R. Ford, who are in this region. Gerald R. Ford only recently has got to this theatre. That clearly also a key component of this attack. I've seen images being told of the refueling planes setting off from Ben Gurion Airport in Tel Aviv, which is, by the way, closed at the moment. Now, that is, when airspace is closed here, it is not supposed to be for days on end. So at the moment, the airspace over Israel is only theoretically closed until midday. I suspect that will be extended. I've just seen an image of air movements across this region, and there are almost no airplanes, commercial airplanes, in the sky now over Iran, Iraq, Israel, and Jordan. It wouldn't surprise me at all if airspace across a wider area remained closed for a significant period of time. I mean, this is, without resorting to cliches, Jerusalem is a city in the state of a calm before the storm. At the moment, this feels like a normal Saturday morning, a Shabbat. It is quiet. There is very little on the road. But everybody in Israel knows that Iran will respond, and they will remember that when Iran responded before, it launched missiles, predominantly towards Tel Aviv, that caused huge damage and did kill people. The IRGC has already said that people have been killed in Iran. So this is a significant escalation. And I just want to remind you that as an indication of Israel's motives for this operation, which we're told is called Shield of Judah, they have created, so Mossad, the intelligence agency, has created a Persian language Telegram channel. Telegram, a very important medium of communication in this area. I want to read to you what they have put on that channel. This is from Mossad, the Israeli agency. My Iranian brothers and sisters, you are not alone. We have set up a very secure and special Telegram channel for you. Together, we will return Iran to its glorious days. Share your photos and videos of the fight for justice with us, and most importantly, take care of yourself. There will be those who think there is a certain irony in saying take care of yourself when Israel and America have just started bombing Iran. But I think that the message there is absolutely clear. Israel is setting up a channel to try to foment the protest, to try to lead to set up a path that leads to regime change. That is quite clearly what
Adam,
Israel wants, and it may well be what America wants.
We've now got the video that Donald Trump has posted on Truth Social. Let's play what he said.
A short time ago, the United States military began major combat operations in Iran. Our objective is to defend the American people by eliminating imminent threats from the Iranian regime, a vicious group of very hard, terrible people. Its menacing activities directly endanger the United States, our troops, our bases overseas, and our allies throughout the world. For 47 years, the Iranian regime has chanted death to America and waged an unending campaign of bloodshed and mass murder, targeting the United States, our troops, and the innocent people in many, many countries. Among the regime's very first acts was to back a violent takeover of the U.S. Embassy in Tehran, holding dozens of American hostages for 444 days. In 1983, Iran's proxies carried out the Marine barracks bombing in Beirut that killed 241 American military personnel. In 2000, they knew and were probably involved with the attack on the USS Cole. Many died. Iranian forces killed and maimed hundreds of American service members in Iraq. The regime's proxies have continued to launch countless attacks against American forces stationed in the Middle East in recent years, as well as U.S. naval and commercial vessels in international shipping lanes. It's been mass terror, and we're not going to put up with it any longer. From Lebanon to Yemen and Syria to Iraq, the regime has armed, trained, and funded terrorist militias that have soaked the earth with blood and guts. And it was Iran's proxy, Hamas, that launched the monstrous October 7th attacks on Israel, slaughtering more than 1,000 innocent people, including 46 Americans, while taking 12 of our citizens hostage. It was brutal, something like the world has never seen before. Iran is the world's #1 state sponsor of terror and just recently killed tens of thousands of its own citizens on the street as they protested. It has always been the policy of the United States, in particular, my administration, that this terrorist regime can never have a nuclear weapon. I'll say it again, they can never have a nuclear weapon. That is why in Operation Midnight Hammer last June, we obliterated the regime's nuclear program at Fordow, Natanz, and Isfahan. After that attack, we warned them never to resume their malicious pursuit of nuclear weapons, and we sought repeatedly to make a deal. We tried. They wanted to do it. They didn't want to do it. Again, they wanted to do it. They didn't want to do it. They didn't know what was happening. They just wanted to practice evil. But Iran refused, just as it has for decades and decades. They've rejected every opportunity to renounce their nuclear ambitions, and we can't take it anymore. Instead, they attempted to rebuild their nuclear program and to continue developing long-range missiles that can now threaten our very good friends and allies in Europe, our troops stationed overseas, and could soon reach the American homeland. Just imagine how emboldened this regime would be if they ever had and actually were armed with nuclear weapons as a means to deliver their message. For these reasons, the United States military is undertaking a massive and ongoing operation to prevent this very wicked, radical dictatorship from threatening America and our core national security interests. We are going to destroy their missiles and raise their missile industry to the ground. It will be totally, again, obliterated. We're going to annihilate their Navy. We're going to ensure that the region's terrorist proxies can no longer destabilize the region or the world and attack our forces and no longer use their IEDs or roadside bombs, as they are sometimes called, to so gravely wound and kill thousands and thousands of people, including many Americans. And we will ensure that Iran does not obtain a nuclear weapon. It's a very simple message. They will never have a nuclear weapon. This regime will soon learn that no one should challenge the strength and might of the United States Armed Forces. I built and rebuilt our military in my first administration, and there is no military on earth even close to its power, strength, or sophistication. My administration has taken every possible step to minimize the risk to U.S. personnel in the region. Even so, and I do not make this statement lightly, the Iranian regime seeks to kill. The lives of courageous American heroes may be lost, and we may have casualties. That often happens in war. But we're doing this not for now. We're doing this for the future, and it is a noble mission. We pray for every service member as they selflessly risk their lives to ensure that Americans and our children will never be threatened by a nuclear-armed Iran. We ask God to protect all of our heroes in harm's way, and we trust that, with his help, the men and women of the armed forces will prevail. We have the greatest in the world, and they will prevail. To the members of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard, the armed forces, and all of the police, I say tonight that you must lay down your weapons and have complete immunity, or, in the alternative, face certain death. So, lay down your arms. You will be treated fairly with total immunity, or you will face certain death. Finally, to the great, proud people of Iran, I say tonight that the hour of your freedom is at hand. Stay sheltered. Don't leave your home. It's very dangerous outside. Bombs will be dropping everywhere. When we are finished, take over your government. It will be yours to take. This will be probably your only chance for generations. For many years, you have asked for America's help, but you never got it. No president was willing to do what I am willing to do tonight. Now you have a president who is giving you what you want. So let's see how you respond. America is backing you with overwhelming strength and devastating force. Now is the time to seize control of your destiny and to unleash the prosperous and glorious future that is close within your reach. This is the moment for action. Do not let it pass. May God bless the brave men and women of America's armed forces. May God bless the United States of America. May God bless you all. Thank you.
So that statement from the US President Donald Trump coming an hour after Israel's defense minister said Israel had attacked Iran. Donald Trump confirming that the US has launched major combat operations against Iran. He put up this 8-minute video on Truth Social in which he said Tehran's menacing activities directly endanger the United States, our troops, our bases overseas and our allies throughout the world. He said, for 47 years, the Iranian regime has chanted death to America and waged an unending campaign of bloodshed. He said it's been mass terror and we're not going to take it any longer. He said that America was going to destroy Iran's missiles, annihilate their navy, and he also said that while steps had been taken to avoid casualties, Americans may be lost. He called on the Islamic Revolutionary Guard to lay down their arms or face certain death. And he also addressed the people of Iran, saying the hour of your freedom is at hand. Let's bring in Deborah Haynes, our Defence and Security Editor, who was listening to that dramatic statement from the American president. Deborah, what did you make of it?
Well, I mean, he's been very clear about the objectives, and they are huge in terms of what he hopes to achieve from this operation. Describing it as major combat operations really does confirm what we were saying earlier about the scale of this attack and how it differs from the previous time that Donald Trump decided to strike Iran. This is clearly not just some limited operation, given what Donald Trump has now set out. He's not saying there's going to be regime change, but he is making very clear that the military action that the US is taking is designed to destroy the regime effectively. And that's why he's making that call to the Iranian people, saying that for them, this is a once in a many generation time to step up and take control. So that does signal that he doesn't see the US playing a role in whatever comes next, but instead is handing that over to the Iranian people, which is, obviously it sounds like a noble statement, but everyone who understands the region understands the enormous risk that's involved here. He's saying as well, so the stated aims that Donald Trump is making in this video address are significant and are clearly benchmarks that he can be held to account for with whatever comes next. He's talking about, as you say, annihilating the Iranian Navy, destroying its missiles, preventing Iran, and he said this repeatedly, from ever having nuclear weapons. And as well, talking directly to all members, not just of the Revolutionary Guard Corps, but also the wider armed forces and the police, all arms of defense and security within Iran, telling them to lay down their weapons. They will be given immunity, or else they will be annihilated. So really making clear the choice that's at stake there. Does the military stay loyal to the regime, or do they allow this American operation supported by Israel to deliver what Donald Trump is saying that it will in terms of a complete overhaul, destruction of the military capabilities of Iran, and therefore, by definition, from what he's saying, the ability of the regime to continue to rule. He didn't say the words regime change. That would be a huge allergic reaction from his own base, who are very anxious about any kind of never-ending wars. But by taking this action, calling it major combat operations, setting out objectives that he wants to stop, to defend the American people from imminent threats from the Iranian regime, to say that he wants to destroy all of its military capabilities. These are serious, significant, and large-scale objectives that will not be achieved overnight unless there is complete surrender. And from what we're hearing from reports on the Iranian side, that is not going to happen. There will be a war, and America's president did make clear that America needs to brace itself for taking casualties. And the big question is just how extensive that's going to be. Is military force alone by the Americans? Yes, they have the most powerful armed forces in the world. There's no question of that. But can that military action alone achieve the objectives that Donald Trump has now set out squarely and publicly, and achieve that with acceptable levels on the American side of harm? That is a huge question, a huge risk. Donald Trump clearly believes the answer is yes, but he cannot see the future. And the future, as we know, when it comes to military operations in the Middle East, it is incredibly risky, incredibly unpredictable, and can go very wrong.
Deborah, for the moment, thanks very much indeed. I want to bring in now Tara Kangaloo, who's the author of The Heartbeat of Iran and a global affairs journalist. Tara, thanks so much for talking to us this morning. We've spoken to you in the last few weeks about the feelings in Iran and the tensions that have been building there with threats from the US. What do you make of what's happened this morning, and how do you think that people in Iran will be responding?
Good morning, Anna. This is a fast-moving story, and just speaking to some folks in Tehran this morning, people are on the edge. Saturday today is the first day of the week in Iran, and people are, in the offices, back to school, back at work, and so you have a situation in the city where life is normal, moving forward, but then all of a sudden in the morning, you see multiple areas hit. As you've been saying on the program, the Pastor complex that houses the presidential palace, as well as the house of the supreme leader, and multiple government offices, an extremely important area, is reportedly hit. Multiple news sites, Iranian news sites, have been hacked. And again, speaking to folks, people are on the edge, but many expected this because this, just like June, as the U.S. and Iran were negotiating, Israel hit, and then the United States continued a week later. But this seems to be a joint effort by Israel and the United States. But right now, people in Iran are holding their breath. They are unclear what's going to happen next. All the while, the resentment toward the regime is intact. At the same time, they have no idea what's in store for them.
Yes, and in the meantime, the Iranian regime has hit back and said that they will retaliate, a crushing retaliation, they say. In the meantime, Donald Trump is appealing to the Islamic Revolutionary Guard to lay down their arms or face certain death. What do you expect the response of the regime to be?
I think there's a contrast between what we hear from the Islamic regime, and this has been proven historically, and their action over the last, not just the summer conflict, the 12-day conflict, but even previous rounds of retaliation. Iran's strikes have been, in some ways, completely coordinated and surgical, with no casualties, no American casualties, and Israeli casualties have been limited during the 12-day war. So I wonder if that's what we're going to see, some form of a coordinated attack, just so that Iran can say we retaliated, save face among its base of supporters domestically, but also contain, again, the casualties on the side of Israel and the United States, because the Islamic regime is very well aware that a military as mighty as that of the United States and Israel combined, if fully gone in, that would mean to the detriment of the regime in its entirety. But at the same time, some argue that when the regime is faced with such threats, then it has nothing to lose and it might go all in. And I do believe that would be quite catastrophic, also regionally, because, as you know, there are Iran's proxies in Yemen, in Lebanon, in Iraq, and at any moment they might be activated, because they are also aware that a destroyed Iranian regime would mean their destruction as well. So this might be a moment for all those proxies to unite and come in full force. So a lot of unknown, but what we do know is once again, we're at a situation, we're in the middle of a negotiation that, by the way, the Omani foreign minister yesterday on the record, this man does not make a lot of media statements and go public, said talks are productive and we have made breakthrough. But once again, as talks are going on, Israel strikes Iran and so much is yet to be seen.
Tara Kangul, we really appreciate your time this morning and giving us your response to these developments, dramatic developments in Iran this morning. Thanks very much indeed. Well, it's now 8 o'clock. Let's just run you through our breaking news this morning. The US and Israel have launched coordinated strikes on Iran. As the attack began just before 10 o'clock local time, plumes of smoke were seen rising over the Iranian capital, Tehran. Explosions have also been heard in other cities across the country, according to Iranian media. A US official has confirmed to Reuters that strikes are being launched by air and by sea. Well, the attack came hours after US President Donald Trump had said he wasn't happy with the latest negotiations with Iran over its nuclear programme. Well, let's now bring in Sally Lockwood, who joins us now from the region. Sally, good morning to you. Give us your reaction where you are to these dramatic developments this morning.
Good morning to you, Anna. Well, it's fair to say this is something that we have been watching very closely and been very concerned about since the middle of January, after Donald Trump warned that he was sending this armada, as he called it, to the Middle East, which is now in place. And when he told Iranian protesters that he was coming to their rescue, that the American military were on their way. It's been very unclear since exactly what was going to happen, but today we now do have an answer that this military operation being carried out by Israel with America is now happening as we speak. Donald Trump confirming that it is a very significant operation and also speaking directly to the protesters that this is your moment for action. Do not let it pass. So we now also know that Donald Trump's objective here is potentially regime change. If you listen closely to what he was saying to Iranian protesters in that video message. And there is a lot of concern here about how Iran is going to respond. It's already warned that an attack by America would result in regional conflict. It would result in potentially an attack on an American warship, of which there are many now here in the Gulf. And I am hearing from a military source at the moment that Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar is being evacuated of military personnel, except for a skeleton team that is going to be left behind, that they received orders this morning to leave the base with their protective equipment and with enough items for 72 hours. We're also hearing that the US Embassy in Doha has a shelter-in-place order at the moment, but not the British Embassy. A member, someone from the UK who lives in Doha contacted me earlier to say there's no shelter-in-place order for the British Embassy at the moment. Now, of course, this is all very reminiscent of last summer, when there were negotiations underway, when there were talks underway, and we felt like there was some sort of diplomatic progress potentially being made between Iran and the US. And then there was that 12-day war launched by Israel, targeting nuclear facilities in Iran. And then America joined. And then that resulted in an attack by Iran on Qatar, on Al Udeid Air Base. But what's different this time is that back in June, it was a coordinated response. The back channels were open and the official lines knew that that response was coming from the Iranians. No one was killed in that response and there was limited damage. This time, it's very, very unpredictable and it's much more concerning because this attack on Iran doesn't have targeted objectives in terms of nuclear facilities. It could be that the actual regime is being targeted. And I'm already hearing from a source inside Iran that a senior member of the Iranian regime has been killed, unconfirmed, just heard from a source. I'm not sure if you're hearing anything more on that. And certainly in terms of the Iranian response here, if this is an attack on the Iranian regime and regime change is the objective here, then their response is very unpredictable indeed, because this is about survival. This is potentially existential for the Iranian regime. And certainly neighboring countries like the UAE, where I am, are very concerned about what this could mean in terms of the region. Could this result in regional conflict? There are American air bases in neighboring countries such as Saudi, Qatar, here in the UAE, Bahrain. And the UAE made clear, along with Saudi, a few weeks ago in public statements that no strikes on Iran were to be carried out from their territory, airspace, or waters, because they are so concerned about how Iran could respond. And I'm also hearing from another military source that America is taking precautions and has set up a separate command center in the region. It would normally be in Al Udeid in Qatar, but I'm hearing that there is a separate command center that's been set up in a neighboring country. I won't reveal which one for security reasons, but it's not the UAE. And it does seem that what is happening here is very significant. I was also told that F-22 fighter jets were flown into an airbase in Israel from America. They're not normally based in the region, and it is America's most capable air-to-air fighter jet. And this source said to me, if they've been brought in, then this really is a big deal. It does feel like we're still obviously going to have to wait to see how this all unfolds today, but it does feel like it could be a very big day indeed.
Well, yes, indeed, Sally. And given what Donald Trump said about the scale of his ambitions, or hinted was the scale of his ambitions, perhaps no surprise that a US official has told Reuters in the last few minutes that the US military is expected to carry out a multi-day operation against Iran. Sally, for the moment, thanks very much indeed. Thank you. Well, let's hear more then from Donald Trump, who put this statement out on his Truth Social platform in the last few minutes.
A short time ago, the United States military began major combat operations in Iran. Our objective is to defend the American people by eliminating imminent threats from the Iranian regime, a vicious group of very hard, terrible people. Its menacing activities directly endanger the United States, our troops, our bases overseas, and our allies throughout the world. For 47 years, the Iranian regime has chanted death to America and waged an unending campaign of bloodshed and mass murder, targeting the United States, our troops, and the innocent people in many, many countries. Among the regime's very first acts was to back a violent takeover of the U.S. Embassy in Tehran, holding dozens of American hostages for 444 days. In 1983, Iran's proxies carried out the Marine barracks bombing in Beirut that killed 241 American military personnel. In 2000, they knew and were probably involved with the attack on the USS Cole. Many died. Iranian forces killed and maimed hundreds of American service members in Iraq. The regime's proxies have continued to launch countless attacks against American forces stationed in the Middle East in recent years, as well as U.S. naval and commercial vessels in international shipping lanes. It's been mass terror, and we're not going to put up with it any longer. From Lebanon to Yemen and Syria to Iraq, the regime has armed, trained, and funded terrorist militias that have soaked the earth with blood and guts. And it was Iran's proxy, Hamas, that launched the monstrous October 7th attacks on Israel, slaughtering more than 1,000 innocent people, including 46 Americans, while taking 12 of our citizens hostage. It was brutal. Something like the world has never seen before. Iran is the world's #1 state sponsor of terror and just recently killed tens of thousands of its own citizens on the street as they protested. It has always been the policy of the United States, in particular, my administration, that this terrorist regime can never have a nuclear weapon. I'll say it again, they can never have a nuclear weapon. That is why in Operation Midnight Hammer last June, we obliterated the regime's nuclear program at Fordow, Natanz, and Isfahan. After that attack, we warned them never to resume their malicious pursuit of nuclear weapons, and we sought repeatedly to make a deal. We tried. They wanted to do it. They didn't want to do it. Again, they wanted to do it. They didn't want to do it. They didn't know what was happening. They just wanted to practice evil. But Iran refused, just as it has for decades and decades. They've rejected every opportunity to renounce their nuclear ambitions, and we can't take it anymore. Instead, they attempted to rebuild their nuclear program and to continue developing long-range missiles that can now threaten our very good friends and allies in Europe, our troops stationed overseas, and could soon reach the American homeland. Just imagine how emboldened this regime would be if they ever had and actually were armed with nuclear weapons as a means to deliver their message. For these reasons, the United States military is undertaking a massive and ongoing operation to prevent this very wicked, radical dictatorship from threatening America and our core national security interests.
We're just going to dip out of that because just in the last few moments, the Israeli military has said, according to Reuters, that missiles have been launched from Iran towards Israel. Let's bring in Adam Parsons, who's in Jerusalem for us now. Adam, what are you hearing?
Yeah, what you may hear while I'm talking to you is the sound of a chime which comes across every mobile phone. Can't turn it off in Israel, which is warning of there it is. This is the message from the IDF saying that sirens have been sounded in several areas across the country. In fact, alerts are saying it's widespread across the country following the identification of missiles launched from Iran towards the state of Israel. The IDF says it has identified missiles. We're hearing uncorroborated reports at significant numbers, some people saying dozens at the moment. I suspect that this will become clear shortly. Defensive systems are operating, they say, to intercept the threat. What does that mean? It means that the Israelis have a globally renowned air defense system known as the Iron Dome, which effectively fires missiles to intercept any of those that have been attacked towards Israel. Now, as you will see, I've just put on a helmet. We will be putting on protective equipment as more and more of these missiles start heading towards us. Now, all the time we are receiving messages about these attacks. These are reprisals, of course, for the coordinated US-Israeli attack on Iran a little earlier. Iran immediately, or very quickly, said that it would be taking countermeasures against Israel specifically. It is likely that that attack will be focused upon Tel Aviv rather than here in Jerusalem. But let's be honest, we don't know. What is apparent is that the US-Israeli attack has been widespread. It initially focused on Tehran, but it has been in multiple waves. It's focused on agencies, ministries in Tehran, also on the Republican Guard, leading officials. It seems that Ayatollah Khamenei has been moved from his base, which was targeted. The Iranian media is saying that the Iranian president is safe and alive. So these reprisals are likely to be significant, and Israelis are getting these messages now, telling them to take shelter.
Well, Adam, we appreciate you being out and talking to us. Do take cover if you need to. In the meantime, let's bring in Deborah Haynes, our Security and Defence editor. And I wanted to get your response to that, the fact that Israel's military is saying that defensive systems are in operation to try to intercept what they say are missiles heading towards Israel now. What do you make of the speed with which Iran appears to have retaliated?
Yes, and we were talking earlier, it was inevitable, and Iran would have been ready. So they could see, as well as everybody else, the enormous American buildup around their country and the potential for American military to launch strikes at any moment. They're also, of course, very aware of Israel's ability to attack them. So their military would have been on high alert to respond to any attack. With the means that they have available. And clearly they are doing exactly that. They see this as presumably existential, especially given what Donald Trump has said in his video statement setting out the objectives. And so Donald Trump gave the Iranian military the option to lay down their weapons and live, or face, in his words, certain death. The fact that they are now launching ballistic missiles towards Israel is a clear indication, and it's no surprise that they are not heeding Donald Trump's ultimatum and are instead standing and fighting. And so now it really will depend on the volume of missiles or drones or whatever they are firing towards Israel, and the capabilities in place for Israel and presumably the US to be able to defend against them. We've seen from previous large-scale Iranian attacks that there is a finite ability to defend against them. Yes, Israel has extraordinary air defences. The US too has incredible capabilities to be able to blast ballistic missiles out of the sky, which is an incredibly difficult feat. And yet there is only so much you can do if there is overwhelming firepower coming in the other direction. So it really will hinge on what Iran has, how much it's able to fire, and how big it wants to go in its response. And if it is a large-scale retaliation by the Iranian regime, then that would indicate that they are not backing down, and that they believe that they need to fight. And clearly believe that they are not going to heed Donald Trump's warnings about effectively surrender and regime change. He didn't use those words, but that was clearly the underlying intent of his message. And so I think it's not just obviously Israel, the immediate target of this attack, but clearly Iran has the ability, if it wants to directly target American military facilities and the warships that have mounted up in the region. There are other, obviously, countries in the region that have American bases and American personnel there, and they too clearly could be targeted. And so this has the moment of significant escalation, and depending on the damage, then again, you go to further escalation when America decides how it's going to respond.
Deborah, thanks very much indeed. Thank you for that. Well, let's get more reaction to that post on Truth Social that Donald Trump had put up, talking about how US military had begun major combat operations, as he called it, in Iran. David Blevins, our US correspondent, joins us now from Washington. A very good morning to you, David. Thanks for joining us. It was a long statement from the president, 8 minutes worth, in which he explained why the US was carrying out these operations. He called them massive and ongoing. He talked, interestingly, didn't he? He said while the action was to defend the American people, he went on to acknowledge that there could be a risk to American lives. I wonder what you made of what he said.
Yes, it was lengthy, as you say, 8 minutes in duration, delivered from Mar-a-Lago, his estate in Florida, where presumably he is monitoring developments from a makeshift situation room, as he did on the night the United States attacked Venezuela, and notably wearing a white USA baseball hat, I think emphasising the role he plays as Commander-in-Chief of the US military, not just a political figure. I think the president sounded emboldened in that statement, talking about Iran and its proxies having engaged in mass terror, as he phrased it, for some 47 years. He gave us something of a history lesson. Then he talked about annihilating the Iranian Navy. He urged the Islamic Revolutionary Guard to lay down their arms or face certain death. But there were four really telling words, I thought, in his statement, and those words were Americans may be lost, because he recognises the potential clearly for this conflict to become something much wider in the region, drawing in other countries like Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, Yemen. He will be aware of that, and he will also be deeply conscious that America could now find itself embroiled in another longer-term war, as it did indeed in Iraq and Afghanistan. So the President choosing his words a little more carefully, but they were certainly delivered in his trademark dramatic Trump style.
Indeed. David, we'll get more reaction from you a little bit later on, but I want to bring in Adam Parsons again now, who's in Jerusalem for us, and a statement from Benjamin Netanyahu, Adam.
Yeah, just a recap, by the way. As you can see, we've now put on protective equipment because we have received a notification, as has the whole of Israel, that Iran has fired missiles towards Israeli territory. Almost coincidental with that, or certainly coming out at the same time as that, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, the Israeli Prime Minister, has put out a statement, not as long as Donald Trump's. My brothers and sisters, citizens of Israel, a short time ago, Israel and the United States embarked on an operation to remove what he describes as the existential threat posed by the terrorist regime in Iran. He goes on to thank Donald Trump and says, for 47 years, the Ayatollah regime has been shouting death to Israel, death to America. It has spilled our blood, murdered many Americans, and massacred its own people. He says Iran must not be armed with nuclear weapons. Our joint action will create the conditions for the courageous Iranian people to take their destiny into their own hands. And this, I think, is the crucial element of this, because this is about the justification, echoing the words of Donald Trump. The time has come for all segments of the Iranian people, the Persians, the Kurds, the Azeris, the Baluchis, the Awazis, to throw off the yoke of tyranny and bring about a free and peaceful Iran. He says, also, I appeal to you, the citizens of Israel, to listen to the instructions of the Home Front Command. That is the app I was telling you about that supplies instructions to all Israelis about how to behave and where to seek shelter at times like this. Together we will stand together, we will fight together, we will ensure the eternity of Israel. So how do we translate that? Well, that is Benjamin Netanyahu saying, A, we are doing this alongside the United States. Remember that the US is, in a diplomatic terms, Israel's not only greatest friends, but one of its last remaining extremely loyal diplomatic allies. And he is saying that this isn't just about destroying Iran's stockpile of ballistic missiles. This isn't just about nuclear enrichment. This is about bringing to an end the regime of Ayatollah Khamenei and his predecessor. This is about, Ayatollah Khamenei being the original Ayatollah, Ayatollah Khamenei being the present Ayatollah. It is about bringing that regime to an end. And the Israelis, of course, blame Iran for fomenting discontent and anger and violence towards Israel through their support of Hamas in Gaza. And of course, the October 7th attacks resonates so deeply, so profoundly in Israeli society, and also through their support of Hezbollah in Lebanon. And right now, Israeli troops are massing on the Lebanese border, they say, for fear of Hezbollah joining in this attack. They say that they blame Iran for supporting the Houthis in Yemen, who have fired missiles towards Israel. I tell you also, Israel is putting troops on the border with Syria for fear of other reprisals. So Israel at the moment has immediately put itself on a war footing, attacking Iran, putting forces around its borders, but is making very clear here that this is about regime change. And that, I think, is why there are so many assets, so many planes in the sky above Iran at the moment, because it's not just about attacking Tehran. We're seeing reports of multiple places around Iran being attacked by this joint operation, and that you are hearing there once again the alerts coming out from the Israeli authorities about the wave of missiles which they believe are on the way. Sirens now sounding in the center of Israel, sounding in the north of Israel. We are yet to have those air raid sirens here in Jerusalem. We did have one this morning at about 8 o'clock, which was a preemptive one. That was the first indication that we had that an attack was on the way. It was at the time made clear that this was a warning to Israeli citizens that they should steel themselves for an actual siren. Well, those are now sounding in parts of Israel as missiles are targeted upon the north and some of the central territories of the country. I would be astonished, frankly, if there wasn't an attack either now or later upon other cities. Notably, I think Tel Aviv, which has been the focus point of previous Iranian attacks on Israel. So a large-scale attack, and I'm hearing that air raid sirens have just started in Tel Aviv. So we will be watching that. They may, well, who knows? One doesn't want to predict what's going to happen, but they are sounding in Tel Aviv, and indeed, and I think you can hear them now, Anna, yeah. Yeah, that is the very, very distinctive sound of air raid sirens there over Tel Aviv, the city. Not that far, it's about an hour between Jerusalem and Tel Aviv, and they are different, very different cities. Jerusalem is the seat of government and is the religious centre of Israel. Tel Aviv is the seat of commerce, is on the coast, and is both cities of about 1 million people. But Tel Aviv is seen as a much more likely target because, quite simply, it would be extremely unlikely for Iran to attack Jerusalem and risk damaging, for instance, Al-Aqsa Mosque behind me, whereas Tel Aviv is seen as being a link with Israeli commerce and Israeli global power. So I would be not surprised at all to see a significant attack on that city, as has happened before. Buildings there were struck in the 12-day war, 8 months ago, and Israeli citizens were killed in that area. So these are the reprisal attacks expected on Tel Aviv and northern and central areas as Iran responds to this coordinated military operation by the United States and Israel.
And Adam, I know you'll keep us up to date with what's going on in Israel, as the Israeli military have said that an additional barrage of missiles has been launched towards Israel. We'll be back to you shortly, and you can keep us up to date from there. In the meantime, let's bring in Deborah Haynes again, our Defence and Security Editor. And Deborah, reflecting on what Adam was telling us there about the statement from Benjamin Netanyahu following shortly after Donald Trump's statement, what do you make of the stated aims and the reasons given for this action? What do you make of how they've expressed it?
Well, they've been extraordinarily clear, haven't they, in terms of their objectives? And that really does, for Donald Trump, expose him to significant risk because he is talking, without saying the words regime change, he is talking about fundamentally changing the course of Iran's future, annihilating the Navy, telling all members of the armed forces, from the Republican Guard right down to the police, to lay down their weapons or face death. And then turning to the Iranian people and effectively saying to them, this is your opportunity. I'm going to come in with the most powerful military in the world and to destroy Iran's military capabilities. And then he didn't say this, but clearly you then draw from that the ability of the Iranian regime to continue to rule. And then it is over to you, to the Iranian people, to then take control of your country. He's really clearly not wanting to give any sense that the United States will be responsible for what comes next, because he will know all too well from history, looking to George Bush's so-called forever wars with his invasion of Iraq and also Afghanistan, but Iraq in particular, when the US went in, the US-led coalition destroyed Saddam Hussein and his armed forces, and then tried to impose a coalition of Iraqi different factions to run a government that was effectively a puppet government to the US administration that was on the ground, this coalition provisional authority that was on the ground running the country, with all the chaos and the bloodshed that then ensued as an insurgency and terrorist groups sprung up in the vacuum of security that followed the invasion of Iraq. So for Donald Trump, with his words, talking to the Iranian people, appealing to them to be the ones to step up and fill that vacuum, presumably he thinks that is him clearly signalling that that's what he intends to happen. But as we know from wars in the Middle East over the ages, that no plan survives first contact with whichever side is putting them together, and the history is difficult and challenging, unpredictable, and the idea that America can come in with significant, overwhelming military power, it has clearly taken the gamble that it can absorb whatever Iran is going to do next in terms of counterattacking, but that then after the fighting stops, that the Iranian people will be able to set up and establish peaceful, successful governance. I don't know what history there is to back up the idea that is possible without significant potential further unrest and insecurity. So there really is a big question mark about what comes next. But in the immediate term, with Iranian missiles now launched towards Israel, there is the huge uncertainty about the ability to shoot them out of the sky, what kind of damage they're going to do. And regardless of what Iran is doing right now, and I think this is really important, the United States has made clear that what they are conducting against Iran are major combat operations. They are not tit for tat. They're not waiting to see how Iran responds and then attacking again. They have launched an operation. Presumably, the attacks against Iran are ongoing. We don't know exactly, we're not getting up-to-date information about exactly what kind of strikes are happening against that country. But from what Donald Trump has said, this is a major operation, which means it's not just one wave and we're done. It means that there will be a plan and there will be multiple targets, and it will play out over multiple days. And yes, Iran is responding, but whether it's able to either in its response get America to change course or change its mind, that's the way we should be looking at this. Iran does not now have the ability to stop America just by launching these attacks. It is clearly fighting back because it sees this as existential and a need to fight for its own survival. And whether or not it has the military capability and capacity to be able to do that, given the significant American firepower that's now surrounding the country, that is the only way that this changes. Donald Trump has been very clear about what America's goals are. And so really it depends on how Iran can resist that. And if it can't, then it does lead back to that question I brought at the beginning of what comes next.
Indeed. And on that question of to what extent we know whether or not attacks are continuing, state media in Iran has just said that Tehran's air defence continues to engage with what they call hostile targets in the city centre and other parts of the city. Deborah, for the moment, thanks very much indeed. Let's bring in our defence analyst, Michael Clark, now. Michael, I'm interested to get your take on the justifications for this put forward by Donald Trump. And to a certain extent, Benjamin Netanyahu as well. We heard from Donald Trump, didn't we, this sense of the American people being under threat. He said that he was doing it to protect America. He talked about Iran being the #1 state sponsor in the world and said that Iran has continued to develop its nuclear programme and plans to develop missiles that can reach the US. What do you make of that? And you were talking earlier about the legality of a strike like this. Do you think that justification leans into that?
Yes, he was obviously trying to do that. It was an astonishing statement. Actually, as I was watching it with you, I was thinking, is this a deep fake? Could this be an AI deep fake? Because it was a really astonishing statement. I mean, and he laid out some of the history of it. He talked about the hostage crisis of 1979 that Jimmy Carter had to deal with, and then the attack on Beirut in 1983 that was in the Ronald Reagan presidency, and then he talked about the attack on the USS Cole in the year 2000, and then on attacks in American forces in Iraq, and then all of the more recent stuff. And he had a whole line of things. And then he went off script a bit and said that they can't be allowed to do this, and we just can't stand for it. We're not going to stand for it any longer. There's a degree of personal exasperation, which is obviously not on his auto cue at that particular moment. But, I mean, it was a terrifically important statement. Because, you know, in the last week or two, critics in America have said that this is a war in search of a strategy. You know, the Americans are building up for some sort of war, but they don't know why. And in a way, Donald Trump provided the answer, which is that he's going for broke. What does he want to achieve? So he says that the Iranians cannot have nuclear weapons, full stop, all right? And then he says that we're going to raise their ballistic missile capability. They can't have missiles either. And then he said that the members of the IRGC, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, have got to lay down their arms or die. Well, there's 220,000 of them. And if we're talking about those who are concerned with the regime, there's also 650,000 of the Bajij, who are the militia who work with the IRGC right down to lowest levels. So he said those people have got to lay down their arms and die. And then he turned his attention to the brave population of Iran, saying, this is your moment. This is your moment. Come out onto the streets. You won't get another chance. So he's going for broke. And he didn't say, as Deborah said, he didn't say the word regime change, but that's what he means. And so here we are. He's absolutely decided that the United States, with Israel, is going to take down the mullahs of Tehran. And this is interesting. I mean, let's be aware of the date. This is the 28th of February. The 28th of February last year was the day on which President Trump and J.D. Vance beat up Zelensky in the White House, in the Oval Office, that famous interview, which was absolutely appalling to most people around the world. Last year, on this day, the United States effectively seemed to change sides in the war in Ukraine. And this year, on the 28th of February, he's gone to war. He's actually gone to war. This is not some sort of enforcement action in the Caribbean against alleged narcotics boats. This is not attacks on the shadow fleet, Russia's shadow fleet getting getting oil out of Venezuela. This is not the attack on Maduro in Venezuela. This is not the bombing of Nigeria over Christmas in favor of Christian communities, allegedly, in Nigeria. This is not just military action. Today, Donald Trump has gone to war. It's a big day.
It is indeed a big day, and so many questions about what could happen next. On this sense that he wants the regime to fall, how difficult would that be?
Well, we'll see. I mean, the regime is in deep trouble, and people have been saying to Trump now for months, you know, the Iranian regime is the weakest it has ever been. This is the moment to topple it. And if you miss this opportunity, you're not true to your MAGA base. If you miss the opportunity to get rid of this malign anti-American influence across the region, then history won't forgive you. That's what he's being told. But equally, of course, another part of his MAGA base says don't get involved in forever wars. And there is a sense in which analysts would say every president in the last 30 years has said, I want to get out of the Middle East. We have nothing to gain from being involved in the Middle East in a deep way. Every president has said that. I mean, Bush said it. Obama definitely said it. Clinton said it. Everybody tries to actually do a deal and then get out of the Middle East. And none of them have succeeded. And here is Donald Trump saying that I will fix things in the Middle East, we'll fix things with Israel, we'll produce peace in Gaza, and we'll deal with the Iranian regime. And undoubtedly, we will then be able to concentrate on the Western Hemisphere, which is the Americas, as foreshadowed in the National Security Strategy Statement of the 25th of November last year. So, yes, we'll do this and then we'll get out. Well, it'll be a neat trick if you can do it, Mr. President, because actually you're getting even further in. Now, that's not to say that this won't work. I mean, America's military power is overwhelming. The Iranian regime is very weak. But whether the people of Iran will come out onto the streets, I think, is somewhat doubtful. The idea, he said, look after yourselves, but come and take the opportunity. I'm not quite sure how they can do that. Because undoubtedly, with the Americans now making war on Iran, the IRGC and the Bajis, the militia, if they're out on the streets, they'll just shoot anyone they see. They will be able to claim that anyone involved in a demonstration, anyone advancing on a government building, is obviously working for the Americans. They'll just shoot them. It would be very unwise, I would have thought, for any Iranians to come out. I think the whole country will hunker down for some considerable number of days to see what happens next. And the point is that going after the Iranian nuclear capabilities and their military is, in a sense, is not likely to help the protesters. They've got to see what happens to the government in Tehran, and whether taking down those military facilities will actually bring the government down is rather doubtful, because the opposition will stay low. They've got to. I'll be interested to hear what Reza Pahlavi said. I mean, he is the pretender to the throne, the son of the Shah of Iran. He's in the United States. He's repeatedly called for demonstrators to come out. And he said, I'm here, I'm ready to come back and, run a new government, run a transitional government for you. Interesting to hear what he says, because if he tries to call people out onto the streets, he may be calling them out to their deaths.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see when America wakes up properly what the response from there is. Michael, for the moment, thanks very much indeed. I just want to show people the pictures of Benjamin Netanyahu making this national address earlier. He's not doing it in English, he's doing it in Hebrew, but just to remind you that he put this statement out a short while after Donald Trump put his own statement on Truth Social. Benjamin Netanyahu saying that Israel and the United States had launched this operation to remove what he said was an existential threat posed by what he called the terror regime in Iran. So that was Benjamin Netanyahu in the last few minutes. But let's go back to Donald Trump's statement, described there by Michael Clark as being extraordinary. This is what he said on Truth Social a short time ago.
A short time ago, the United States military began major combat operations in Iran. Our objective is to defend the American people by eliminating imminent threats from the Iranian regime, a vicious group of very hard, terrible people. Its menacing activities directly endanger the United States, our troops, our bases overseas, and our allies throughout the world. For 47 years, the Iranian regime has chanted death to America and waged an unending campaign of bloodshed and mass murder, targeting the United States, our troops, and the innocent people in many, many countries. Among the regime's very first acts was to back a violent takeover of the U.S. Embassy in Tehran, holding dozens of American hostages for 444 days. In 1983, Iran's proxies carried out the Marine barracks bombing in Beirut that killed 241 American military personnel. In 2000, they knew and were probably involved with the attack on the USS Cole. Many died. Iranian forces killed and maimed hundreds of American service members in Iraq. The regime's proxies have continued to launch countless attacks against American forces stationed in the Middle East in recent years. as well as U.S. naval and commercial vessels and international shipping lanes. It's been mass terror, and we're not going to put up with it any longer. From Lebanon to Yemen and Syria to Iraq, the regime has armed, trained, and funded terrorist militias that have soaked the earth with blood and guts. And it was Iran's proxy, Hamas, that launched the monstrous October 7th attacks on Israel, slaughtering more than 1,000 innocent people, including 46 Americans, while taking 12 of our citizens hostage. It was brutal, something like the world has never seen before. Iran is the world's #1 state sponsor of terror and just recently killed tens of thousands of its own citizens on the street as they protested. It has always been the policy of the United States, in particular, my administration, that this terrorist regime can never have a nuclear weapon. I'll say it again, they can never have a nuclear weapon. That is why in Operation Midnight Hammer last June, we obliterated the regime's nuclear program at Fordow, Natanz, and Isfahan. After that attack, we warned them never to resume their malicious pursuit of nuclear weapons, and we sought repeatedly to make a deal. We tried. They wanted to do it. They didn't want to do it. Again, they wanted to do it. They didn't want to do it. They didn't know what was happening. They just wanted to practice evil. But Iran refused, just as it has for decades and decades. They've rejected every opportunity to renounce their nuclear ambitions, and we can't take it anymore. Instead, they attempted to rebuild their nuclear program and to continue developing long-range missiles that can now threaten our very good friends and allies in Europe, our troops stationed overseas, and could soon reach the American homeland. Just imagine how emboldened this regime would be if they ever had and actually were armed with nuclear weapons as a means to deliver their message. For these reasons, the United States military is undertaking a massive and ongoing operation to prevent this very wicked, radical dictatorship from threatening America and our core national security interests. We are going to destroy their missiles and raise their missile industry to the ground. It will be totally, again, obliterated. We're going to annihilate their Navy. We're going to ensure that the region's terrorist proxies can no longer destabilize the region or the world and attack our forces and no longer use their IEDs or roadside bombs, as they are sometimes called, to so gravely wound and kill thousands and thousands of people, including many Americans. And we will ensure that Iran does not obtain a nuclear weapon. It's a very simple message. They will never have a nuclear weapon. This regime will soon learn that no one should challenge the strength and might of the United States Armed Forces. I built and rebuilt our military in my first administration, and there is no military on earth even close to its power, strength, or sophistication. My administration has taken every possible step to minimize the risk to U.S. personnel in the region. Even so, and I do not make this statement lightly, the Iranian regime seeks to kill. The lives of courageous American heroes may be lost, and we may have casualties. That often happens in war. But we're doing this not for now. We're doing this for the future, and it is a noble mission. We pray for every service member as they selflessly risk their lives to ensure that Americans and our children will never be threatened by a nuclear-armed Iran. We ask God to protect all of our heroes in harm's way, and we trust that, with his help, the men and women of the armed forces will prevail. We have the greatest in the world, and they will prevail. To the members of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard, the armed forces, and all of the police, I say tonight that you must lay down your weapons and have complete immunity, or, in the alternative, face certain death. So, lay down your arms. You will be treated fairly with total immunity, or you will face certain death. Finally, to the great, proud people of Iran, I say tonight that the hour of your freedom is at hand. Stay sheltered. Don't leave your home. It's very dangerous outside. Bombs will be dropping everywhere. When we are finished, take over your government. It will be yours to take. This will be probably your only chance for generations. For many years, you have asked for America's help, but you never got it. No president was willing to do what I am willing to do tonight. Now you have a president who is giving you what you want. So let's see how you respond. America is backing you with overwhelming strength and devastating force. Now is the time to seize control of your destiny and to unleash the prosperous and glorious future that is close within your reach. This is the moment for action. Do not let it pass. May God bless the brave men and women of America's armed forces. May God bless the United States of America. May God bless you all. Thank you.
So that was Donald Trump's statement in the last hour, in which he confirmed that the US military had begun what he described as major combat operations. He later went on to call them massive and an ongoing operation. Well, while we were playing that out, we've just had word via the Iranian Fars news agency. They've put out a statement from the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. Their public relations department has announced that in response, they say, to the aggression of the hostile and criminal enemy against the Islamic Republic of Iran, they say the first wave of large-scale missile and drone attacks by the Islamic Republic of Iran on the occupied territories began. So that's the IRGC putting out a statement saying that they have launched what they call a first wave of large-scale missile and drone attacks. And we've already heard from Israel that they say that they have detected missiles heading in their direction. I think we can go to Adam Parsons, not just at this moment. We're going to go to Sally Lockwood, who is in Dubai for us. And Sally, I'm seeing a number of wires dropping, of news coming in of various embassies around the region putting in these shelter-in-place orders for their personnel there. How nervous is the region around Iran at the moment?
Hello to you, Anna. The region is nervous. The region has been nervous for a number of weeks now, but certainly today, much more so. It's a very big day. Donald Trump has declared war on Iran, and we don't yet know exactly what that means for the region. It's very unpredictable and is very concerning in terms of how Iran is going to respond. And certainly Gulf states like the UAE, where I am, have been very concerned. They have a policy of de-escalation, of diplomacy, because as much as they don't like the Iranian regime, they don't either want to look at potentially the prospect of what it could mean trying to overthrow the regime, because this is an existential threat for the regime and we don't know how they're going to respond. This is about survival, and their response is very unpredictable. They've already warned that American assets in the Middle East would be legitimate targets in the event of war with Iran. And certainly at the moment, Qatar and the UAE are already taking precautions in terms of the US embassies in both countries, which now have shelter-in-place orders. So there's an embassy in Abu Dhabi here in the UAE. There's a shelter-in-place order for the American embassy there at the moment. They also have a consulate here in Dubai, where a shelter-in-place order is also in place. And they're warning Americans in the country to also take shelter. In Qatar, we heard a few hours ago that they issued a shelter-in-place order for the embassy there. The British embassy, I've been told, currently doesn't have that precaution. And I also heard from a military source this morning that Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar, that's America's largest air base in the region, is also being evacuated of non-essential personnel who were warned this morning to leave the air base with their protective equipment and with enough items for 72 2 hours. I'm also hearing the first reports of travel disruption to the region. We're keeping quite a close eye on it. The airspace remains open here in the UAE and in Qatar at the moment. It's now closed over Iran, Iraq, and Israel. And it looks like Syria may now also have a similar closure. There's no aircraft, or very, very few aircraft appearing over Syrian airspace at the moment. And Germany's Lufthansa airline is suspending flights to and from Tel Aviv, Beirut, and Oman until March the 7th. That update from Germany's major carrier Lufthansa. They're also suspending flights to and from Dubai for today and tomorrow. 2 Malaysian airline flights have also been diverted. One has been turned back to Kuala Lumpur that was bound for Doha, and there was another flight bound for Jeddah in Saudi Arabia, which has been diverted to India. I've just spoken to someone in Italy who's about to board a flight coming to the UAE with Emirates, and at the moment they've been told that it's business as usual. But certainly the region is on high alert, and it has been for a number of weeks. But today is the day that we have been waiting for, and many here in the region were dreading. There's certainly a very, very tense atmosphere here today. Iran not only warned that it would target American assets in the region, there was also very inflammatory language by the Ayatollah, who said that they are capable of sinking an American warship, that they would send an American warship to the bottom of the sea. And that is obviously a big concern, is we don't know what the Iranian response is going to be. It's very unpredictable, but there is a large military presence here now by America, a large number of American warships here in the Gulf, not far from here, and we don't know how Iran is going to respond. We already know that they have fired missiles at Israel. What we don't know is whether they're going to try and target American assets in the region. There's obviously that enormous airbase in Qatar. There's an airbase here in Abu Dhabi. There's a significant military presence in Bahrain and also in Saudi Arabia, a number of other countries in the region. And we just don't know what that means today. But I should say that the UAE made clear, along with Saudi Arabia a few weeks ago in public statements, that no strikes on Iran were to come from their territory, airspace or waters, because of course both countries are extremely concerned about how Iran is going to respond in the event of war, which is now underway. And I'm also hearing from a local source in Bahrain that there's a lot of military activity in the sky and that there's air raid sirens now sounding in Bahrain as well. So a lot to watch today, and it feels like an extremely big moment. We just don't know how it's all going to unfold.
Yeah, and Sally, you mentioned Bahrain. The Bahrainian Interior Ministry has talked about, they've announced in the last few minutes that an alarm siren has been activated, and they've said citizens and residents are requested to head to the nearest safe place. You also mentioned other places in the region. I'm just seeing here as well, the US Embassy in Qatar has issued a duck and cover warning to US citizens until further notice. They say an alert that missile is incoming, imminent strike. So that's according to the Reuters news agency. And you mentioned airlines as well. As you were talking and mentioning various airlines, there were more drops coming on the wires for us as well, more reports. Air France apparently cancelling flights to and from Tel Aviv and Beirut that had been slated for today. And I can see others out Arabia as well, saying their flights to Iran, Iraq and other parts of the region have been cancelled. So, you know, a time with a lot of questions, Sally, for the people in the region.
Yeah, absolutely, Anna. I mean, we had a taste of this last summer, that 12-day war that Israel launched against Iran, targeting its nuclear facilities, and then America joining in airstrikes on nuclear facilities in Iran. There is precedent here, and that took place while America and Iranian negotiators were supposedly trying to come to some sort of agreement and deal when it came to nuclear and uranium enrichment in Iran. And then Israel carried out those strikes, America joined, and Iran retaliated, firing missiles at Qatar. It was a face-saving exercise back last year when that happened. The diplomatic channels remained open. It was a choreographed response. This time, it's different. This is an attack on the Iranian regime, as Donald Trump made clear in that extraordinary video statement that he posted on social media. And that means that this is very different for the Iranian regime this time. It's not a face-saving exercise in terms of just some sort of choreographed, coordinated military response. This is about survival for the regime, which makes their response extremely unpredictable. They've said that American military assets in the region, of which there are a large number, not just bases in neighbouring countries, but also now 2 aircraft strike carrier groups and a large number of warships, fast jets that have been brought into the region, other air assets that we've been told, if you look at what they've got in the region at the moment, they are preparing for potentially a weeks-long campaign here. Last year, it was a very short campaign. It was a very targeted military strike, and Iran was able to retaliate, and then everything quietened down, and there was a ceasefire, and Donald Trump declared victory. This time it feels very different. We don't know the extent of the American military operation that's going to be carried out, and we don't know the extent of the Iranian response, but they have warned that it's going to be crushing, as they put it. They threatened a harsh or crushing response.
Okay.
And the Ayatollah Ali Khamenei has also threatened that Iran possesses the capability to sink American warships in the Persian Gulf, of which there are many at the moment.
Sally, thanks very much indeed. Thank you. It's 9 o'clock. Let's just recap our breaking news for you this morning. The US and Israel have launched coordinated strikes on Iran. President Donald Trump has confirmed the US is carrying out what he described as major combat operations and urged Iranians to rise up against their government. Well, Iran has begun to retaliate, launching missiles and drone strikes towards Israel, where air raid sirens have rung out. Well, the attack came hours after US President Donald Trump had said he wasn't happy with the latest negotiations with Iran over its nuclear programme. Well, multiple cities in Iran have been struck, including the capital Tehran, as well as Tabriz, Isfahan, Qom, Karaj and Kermanshah. As the attack began just before 10 a.m. local time, plumes of smoke were seen rising over the Iranian capital. The first strike happened near the offices of Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. Several major airlines have cancelled their flights to the region. Well, the Israel Defense Forces have said that it's identified missiles launched from Iran towards the state of Israel. The Israeli Air Force has said that it's operating to intercept and strike threats where necessary. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said, "My brothers and sisters, citizens of Israel, a short time ago, Israel and the United States embarked on an operation to remove the existential threat posed by the terrorist regime in Iran. I thank our great friend, President Donald Trump, for his historic leadership." For 47 years, the Ayatollah regime has been shouting, "Death to Israel, death to America." It has spilled our blood, murdered many Americans and massacred its own people. This murderous terrorist regime must not be armed with nuclear weapons that would allow it to threaten all of humanity. Our joint action will create the conditions for the courageous Iranian people to take their destiny into their own hands.
A short time ago, the United States military began major combat operations in Iran. Our objective is to defend the American people by eliminating imminent threats from the Iranian regime, a vicious group of very hard, terrible people. Its menacing activities directly endanger the United States, our troops, our bases overseas, and our allies throughout the world. For 47 years, the Iranian regime has chanted "Death to America" and waged an unending campaign of bloodshed and mass murder, targeting the United States, our troops, and the innocent people in many, many countries. Among the regime's very first acts was to back a violent takeover of the U.S. Embassy in Tehran, holding dozens of American hostages for 444 days. In 1983, Iran's proxies carried out the Marine barracks bombing in Beirut that killed 241 American military personnel. In 2000, they knew and were probably involved with the attack on the USS Cole. Many died. Iranian forces killed and maimed hundreds of American service members in Iraq. The regime's proxies have continued to launch countless attacks against American forces stationed in the Middle East in recent years, as well as U.S. naval and commercial vessels in international shipping lanes. It's been mass terror, and we're not going to put up with it any longer.
Well, let's bring in our security and defence editor, Deborah Haynes, now. So, Deborah, Israel and the US announcing that they've launched what they describe as major combat operations in Iran. How significant a moment is this?
It's a hugely significant moment. And actually, I'd probably go so far as to say it's the biggest gamble by any American president in terms of foreign policy since George Bush launched the large-scale invasion of Iraq more than 20 years ago. Donald Trump has made clear these are major combat operations. This isn't just a one-off targeted strike, as he did before last year in June when he launched those strikes against Iranian nuclear facilities. This time, there are waves of strikes going on against multiple targets across the country. And the US president has set out in that video address that you just heard very clearly what his war aims are. It is effectively regime change. He doesn't use those words, but he says he wants to defend the American people from the imminent threat posed by the Iranian regime. He talks about wanting to annihilate the Iranian Navy. And then he speaks very clearly to the Iranian armed forces, from the Republican Guard all the way down to the police, telling them to lay down your weapons or face certain death. And then, of course, it is the question, if that is the goal, and these are measurable targets that he has set himself, targets that he will presumably be able to point to as success if he achieves them, but equally targets that his opponents will be able to point to and criticize him if he isn't able to achieve them, and ask why has America launched this operation? And that is a huge gamble. But then, of course, there is that second, arguably even bigger peril about what comes next. We know from interventions in the past that America, which has got the world's most powerful military, will almost certainly prevail militarily when it comes to this kind of operation. But what comes next, there is no good track record for that in recent years. Just look to what happened in Iraq, look to what happened in Afghanistan as well, where there was an ambition to cultivate democratic rule in both of those countries, both of which failed or triggered large-scale insurgencies. This time around, Donald Trump seems to be trying to contain what his effort is, making it purely a military intervention. And then that message that he issued to the Iranian people, saying that it's over to you, effectively. This is your historic moment to take your freedom, take control of your government, and lead your own destiny. But that's a huge gamble, and that is something that the US, if they want to have distance and not be dragged into, for example, maintaining security over the long term, that it's going to be very, very hard to control from a distance. And where are the guarantees that whatever comes next is better than what the US is dealing with now when it comes to the Islamic Republic? So there are huge longer term risks, and in the short term, of course, there is the immediacy of this war. And yes, Iran is retaliating now, but it's very unclear as to whether the whatever Iran is able to do in terms of the strikes that it's launching, and you're obviously hearing blood-curdling warnings of what they are able to do, whether that is sufficient to change the American calculations. The US will have absolutely counted on the Iranians firing back, but they would presumably have a plan to be able to absorb that. Clearly, America, the president has set the stage for potential American casualties, but they believe that is a price worth paying in order to achieve these clear military objectives that they have set. So it's doubtful, short of something unpredictable, that Iran is going to be able to stop this American operation against the country. But that does still raise huge questions about what comes next.
Indeed. And just while you were talking, a Qatar official has confirmed to Sky News that a missile over Qatar has been intercepted by air defences. And I just noticed as well that the Qatari government has issued a mobile phone alert warning people to stay away from military installations and to shelter in place. And Deborah, we've also had a bit of an update, it appears, from the Israeli military, certainly quoted on the Reuters news agency. They have said that the Israeli-US joint strikes on Iran have targeted dozens of military targets. They say their forces are deployed ready for offensive operations across all sectors and against any enemy. And they go on to say, at this hour, the Israeli Air Force continues to strike targets across Iran and operations will continue as required. And given the scale of the ambition that we were just talking about, Deborah, we imagine that there'll be fairly intensive military activity for some time.
Yes, there's no way that Donald Trump's aims can be achieved with just one strike alone. And clearly, what we're seeing, and it's a military operation, so it is hard to be able to keep track of exactly what's happening in the skies because we're getting these updates, but obviously there is action happening right now, and so for the region, what you're hearing in terms of the warnings to civilians in countries like Qatar is absolutely to be expected. There has been huge, as you're hearing from Sally, huge uncertainty for people in the countries in the Gulf about what Iran will do when it strikes back, because there are many American assets in those places. And so Iran will presumably be wanting to strike against American targets. Like we've been hearing, this is existential. And so they will presumably be going all out to try to defend themselves, because they know that diplomacy has paused for now, and Donald Trump has taken this decision to make this intervention. He has set out what he wants to achieve from that, and that is to effectively decapitate Iran's ability to pose a military threat. And that is a huge and wide-ranging objective. And it is something that will require, if the Iranians aren't going to heed this ultimatum from the American president to lay down their weapons, and there is absolutely no indication that that's what they're going to do, then it is going to require significant American firepower. And there will, of course, be questions. Can this be achieved purely from the air alone? America will absolutely, the US president will absolutely be hoping that its warplanes, its warships, its drones, its cyber operations, its space effects can achieve this destruction of the Iranian military machine from a distance. There will be no desire to see American boots on the ground, but that does bring huge questions. How can this possibly be achieved without some kind of ground offensive as well, unless there is a decision by the Iranians to roll over and give up? But that seems very unlikely from all that we know about the history of the Islamic Republic. They are not going to roll over. They have been trained to fight and die, and presumably that's what we're going to see.
Deborah, for the moment, thank you. Let's turn our attention to Washington. Our US correspondent, David Blevins, is there for us. And David, as Deborah was saying there, a huge step being taken by the US president, announcing these combat operations, extensive combat operations with extensive aims on Iran. It's still the middle of the night there in Washington. How do you think this will be received when Americans wake up across the country?
Well, Americans have been hearing conflicting messages from Donald Trump in relation to Iran for a very long time now. 9 months ago, he told them Iran's nuclear capability had been completely obliterated. Just last month, they read a post on social media where he was encouraging protesters in Tehran to keep going and reassuring them that help was on the way. That help never arrived. And as recently as yesterday, he was suggesting that he was prepared to do a deal with Iran and would prefer to do that rather than strike the country.
David,
and now, without a vote in Congress, he has gone to war, it seems.
Apologies for interrupting, David. We'll come back to you in a minute, but we want to go to Adam Parsons, who is hearing sirens there, I understand, in Jerusalem.
Yeah, the air raid sirens have just started again here in Jerusalem. We've been getting a series of alerts about incoming attacks coming into Israel across a huge expanse of this land, north, south, towards Tel Aviv. I've just had a message saying missiles reported on their way into the West Bank of Israel, which is, of course, occupied territory, Palestine, as seen by most governments. Now, what, about 25 minutes ago, we saw a series of intercepts in the sky above Jerusalem, booms. We just had a large boom coming from over in that direction. And these sirens suggest that they feel that there are missiles coming over in this direction. Now, generally, Iran would not be targeting Jerusalem for the reason that area over there, the Al-Aqsa Mosque, is one of the holiest sites in Islam. But there are missiles that will come over here. In fact, if you look there, that is the side of a missile intercept. So that is an Iranian missile that has been flown across here, probably towards a different target, but which has been intercepted by Israeli air defense. And that is what we are seeing in the skies above Jerusalem, are the booms of intercepts of missiles in this sky. The situation here, oh, that's another loud boom you're hearing there of a missile being intercepted here. The situation here, of course, has escalated very, very rapidly this morning from 8 o'clock, so that's 3¼ hours ago, when the first siren sounded. That was a preemptive siren to warn Israelis that military action was imminent and that they were likely to be asked to take shelter. And then just 3 hours later, we now know that Israel and the United States coordinated a military attack. There's another intercept that you just see there. You see that large puff of grey smoke? That is the scene of another interception. Very large boom we just heard in the skies above us, above Jerusalem. And so this is the cacophony, and that's another trail there, and you can hear a jet flying overhead. It's a cloud cover over Jerusalem today. You see that large plume of smoke there from another interception. This is the soundtrack to Israel at the moment, and that's another element to it. Just that chiming sound you can hear is the alert that is now played out on mobile phones and devices across this country. That is a warning that is sent out on apps on people's phones and other devices, warning them of incoming missiles and telling them to take shelter. As you can see, my team and I are all in protective equipment. That's a very, very loud intercept there. That doesn't feel as if that one is too far away. These are some of the loudest booms and interceptions that we've heard so far this morning. And Israel is a tense country right now. In fact, I'm looking there. There is a plume of smoke that is just rising from a scene well, that is not far away from us at all. The smoke that you can see rising there, we don't know what has caused that. But that is a venue down there which is used as a concert venue over the course of summer here in the heart of Jerusalem, and there is now smoke pouring out from that. That is just in the shadow of the old city of Jerusalem. That is extraordinarily near to some of the holiest sites in Christianity and Islam. We'll find out what has happened there, but that is smoke pouring out from there, and that followed on, as you heard, from the sound of intercepts here in the skies above Jerusalem. Well, you'll be well aware that that is an air raid siren that is being activated once again. So we're looking around us all the time to see what is happening in these skies. Let me tell you that also Israeli military have sent forces up to the border with Lebanon to preempt Hezbollah potentially joining this attack. They put forces in Syria as well. And clearly, as we know, what has preempted all of this is a coordinated attack by Israeli and American forces on Iran. Iran always said that it would respond. It said that it would that there would be a regional conflict if it were attacked. And we are receiving reports of attacks not just on Israel, but also reports of in Bahrain, the UAE, and other places in the region. So at the moment, this feels as if things are escalating extremely quickly. There's still traffic moving on the roads along there. I don't see any emergency response yet to that, but we can certainly also hear we can hear the alerts going off on phones as we speak. More thuds in the distance, more sounds of intercepts in the skies above us. Maybe you can hear those thuds beyond the cloud cover at the moment, because the clouds are relatively low. You can't necessarily see those interceptions. What you then see is sometimes the smoke after them. What I can tell you is you're beginning to feel a smell in the air, slightly acrid, burning smell, which may be coming from over there, maybe as a result of these intercepts. The streets around us here in Jerusalem are, as you would imagine, deserted. People have been told to take shelter here and across so much of Israel as they wait to see the extent of this Iranian response.
Adam, you must say, if you need to take cover, we really appreciate this reporting, some extraordinary scenes there. Just while you were talking, I was just looking at the latest statement from the IDF. It's lengthy, but just to pick out a few bits of it for our audience, they basically talk about the military action that they've undertaken with the US. They call it a joint, broad and powerful operation to fundamentally harm the Iranian terrorist regime. That's how they put it. They say it included an attack on dozens of military targets as part of a broad, coordinated and joint attack. They talk as well about the months leading up to the attack. They say close joint planning was carried out between the IDF and the US Army, which enabled this broad attack to be carried out, they say, with maximum synchronisation and the coordination between the armies. It is lengthy. I'm just picking out individual bits. They talk about continuing to act to eliminate any emerging threat against the citizens of the State of Israel anywhere and at any time. So the IDF there putting out their statement off the back of Benjamin Netanyahu explaining his aims and the decisions behind it, but some interesting detail there on the level of coordination with the US, Adam.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is an extraordinary moment, because this is also not just a coordinated activity by Israel and the United States, but it is apparent that the two nations have come together to try to precipitate regime change in Iran. It's something that they've talked about for so long. It's been whispered as being something they want. We saw the protests, of course, recently on the streets of Iran, where thousands of people were killed, but which did not lead to the fall of the regime. And then the talks that we saw in Geneva, it seemed as if America's real interest was in thwarting Iran's nuclear ambitions. Israel, we know, was much more focused on trying to persuade the Americans to push for a reduction in Iran's ballistic missile arsenal. And yet now what we're seeing is effectively a full frontal assault on the Iranian regime. Mossad, the Israeli intelligence service, has now launched a Persian language telegram channel, which is, to all intents and purposes, calling for an uprising against the Ayatollahs. And clearly this attack, this coordinated attack, this call for the end of the regime represents for Iranians an existential threat, a truly existential threat if you are part of the regime. Now remember, the regime is bolstered by the Republican Guard, by the network of secret police, which has held that regime in power for so long, which has effectively used, and we've seen this in many countries over many decades, fear to repress protest. We have seen in recent times some number of protests taking back to the streets, but what the Israelis and the Americans are trying to do is to embolden those people. Now, it's a risk because, of course, there's a very decent chance that people certainly won't want to come out on the streets to protest if they think that missiles are going to rain down on their country. There's always a chance that people, when their nation is under attack, sort of rally behind the flag. So the unintended consequences of this are, of course, unpredictable. The predictable consequence was that Iran would respond by unleashing a volley of missiles, potentially causing a regional conflict. And that is what Iran has done this time. Remember, in the previous conflict, it was effectively an exchange of missiles between Iran and Israel, and then capped off by America attacking. What is now seems to be happening is that Iran is attacking certainly Israel strongly, but is also targeting other areas. A US base in Bahrain. It's not clear to me yet whether or not the attacks on the UAE, if that is confirmed, are to do with US facilities or whether they are other targets. And certainly Iran's response has been immediate and it has been strong. I mean, we are 3.5 hours ago was pretty much the start of this when that siren first sounded here in Israel. Katz confirmed that Israel had attacked, so clearly the attack had started before that. But this conflict is a matter of hours old, and yet already what we are seeing are significant escalations on both sides and an attempt, I think, by Iran to turn this into a regional war. Whether that will succeed, we don't know, but as evidenced by the fact you're hearing these chimes, these alerts on devices as I speak to you, Israel is under attack, Iran is under attack, the airspace across much of this region has been closed, and the United States has built up a colossal military presence here, its biggest military presence since the Iraq War more than 20 years ago. And that, including these two carrier groups, one of which is effectively positioned off Israel and is an extra form of defense for the Israelis, the extent to which this war will now escalate, I think, will only become clear in the coming hours and days. But the amount of firepower that there is here is enormous.
Yeah, extraordinary. Adam, thanks very much indeed. Adam Parsons there in Jerusalem, witnessing those air defence systems intercepting some of the missiles heading into Israel. In the meantime, while he was talking, we understand from Bahrain's news agency that they say that the service centre of the US Navy's Fifth Fleet has been subjected to a missile attack. They say that they will provide further details in due course, but they urge the public to follow instructions issued by the relevant official authorities. Let's go to Dubai now. We can rejoin Sally Lockwood, our correspondent, who's there for us. Interesting to get this latest news from Bahrain and a number of countries in the region reporting instructions to civilians to take cover.
Yeah, that's right, Anna. It's really escalated in the last half an hour or so. We're hearing reports that US military facilities have been struck in Bahrain, that smoke is rising from the Jaffa area, which hosts a US naval base. This is a very, very big deal here in the Middle East. It is home to the US's major naval presence in the region. It hosts up to 9,000 American military personnel at any one time. And we are hearing reports, as you say, from the media in Bahrain, that the military facility there has been struck. It is home to the Fifth Fleet in Bahrain. It's home to the US Fifth Fleet and critical for naval operations in the Gulf. Now, it's unlikely that they have 9,000 personnel there at the moment because, of course, precautions have been taken in American bases ahead of this strike that we've seen today, because, of course, there's been a huge amount of concern about this war erupting, which has now happened, and, of course, how Iran is going to respond. We're also hearing very concerning reports of missiles flying over the United Arab Emirates, where I am, and that has come from the British Embassy here in the UAE, which put out a post not long ago saying we are aware of missiles flying over the United Arab Emirates following escalating regional tensions. British nationals are advised to shelter in place. Now, I heard from a local source in Abu Dhabi that they've heard loud explosions there, that families and children are absolutely terrified. The UAE prides itself, along with Qatar, of being one of the safest places to live in the world. It's home to a lot of British nationals who choose to live here. And one of the reasons many of them do is because of safety. They feel like it's a very safe place to live. It's a very safe place to bring up families. And today it feels very different. War has now erupted in the Middle East. America has launched war against Iran. And we don't know yet the extent of Iran's response, but we're hearing explosions also in Kuwait. I'm hearing from a local source there that there have been explosions heard by the Avenues Mall in Kuwait, again, another neighboring country home to American military assets. And of course, Qatar as well, home to Al Udeid Air Base, America's biggest air base in the region. Qatari officials have confirmed to Sky News that missiles over Qatar have been intercepted by air defences in the last hour or so. The US Embassy has shelter-in-place orders for Qatar, Bahrain, the UAE, Jordan, Israel. They're also warning their citizens to shelter in place as well if they're in those countries. We're already seeing a huge amount of travel disruption, airlines cancelling flights, aircraft that are in the air being turned around and rerouted. And the UAE has temporarily, it says, closed its airspace. And I've been looking on flight radar in the last few minutes. It looks like Qatar's airspace is also now closed. We heard this from the UAE's General Civil Aviation Authority, that it's temporarily closed its airspace, it says, as a precautionary measure. And the UAE Interior Ministry is saying it's taking all precautionary measures to maintain the safety of people here. But certainly this is the moment many in this region have been absolutely dreading, because the Iranian regime has warned that any attack by America would result in regional conflict, that American military assets in the region would be legitimate targets. And of course, there's going to be potentially huge economic impact as well. We don't yet know the extent of Iran's response. It's much less predictable and it's much more concerning than last year. Because last year, during that 12-day war between Israel and Iran that America joined, there were very clear targeted objectives. They were going for nuclear facilities. This time, it seems that they're also going for the Iranian regime. So the Iranian regime are fighting for their very survival. This is existential. And essentially, they have nothing to lose. So we're all now bracing ourselves to see exactly the extent of the Iranian response and how long this is all going to last. But it's certainly very interesting that a member of the Iranian regime has posted today saying, "We warned you. Now you've started down a path whose end is no longer in your hands." And I think that's the concern here, is that Donald Trump seemingly wants to see regime change through this war. And it's a big gamble. We don't know how it's going to end.
Sally Lockwood, thanks very much indeed for getting us up to date with all the latest from where you are. For those just joining us, let's recap our breaking news this morning. The US and Israel have launched coordinated strikes on Iran. President Donald Trump has confirmed the US is carrying out what he described as major combat operations and urged Iranians to rise up against their government. Iran has begun to retaliate, launching missiles and drone strikes towards Israel, where air raid sirens have rung out. There have also been strikes reported elsewhere in the Middle East, as you were just hearing, including in Bahrain and Qatar. An Iranian official has told Reuters all US bases and interests are within reach. Well, multiple cities in Iran have been struck, including the capital Tehran, as well as Tabriz, Isfahan, Qom, Karaj and Kermanshah. As the attack began, just before 10 a.m. local time, plumes of smoke were seen rising over the Iranian capital. The first strike happened near the offices of Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. This is what we heard from Donald Trump in a post on Truth Social shortly after the strikes began.
To the members of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard, the armed forces, and all of the police, I say tonight that you must lay down your weapons and have complete immunity, or, in the alternative, face certain death. So, lay down your arms. You will be treated fairly with total immunity, or you will face certain death. Finally, to the great, proud people of Iran, I say tonight that the hour of your freedom is at hand. Stay sheltered. Don't leave your home. It's very dangerous outside. Bombs will be dropping everywhere. When we are finished, take over your government. It will be yours to take. This will be probably your only chance for generations.
Well, Iran has begun to retaliate, with the Israeli Air Force saying it's attempting to intercept strikes towards Israeli territory. Air raids are ringing out across several cities, including Jerusalem and Tel Aviv. Well, Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps announced the counter-attack on Telegram, saying, in an answer to the hostile and criminal enemy assault to the Islamic Republic of Iran, the first broad wave of missile and drone attacks of the Islamic Republic of Iran towards the occupied land has begun. Well, a short time ago, we heard from Israel's President Benjamin Netanyahu.
A short while ago, Israel and the United States launched a joint campaign, Operation Lion's Roar. The objective of the operation is to put an end to the threat from the Ayatollah regime in Iran. At this time, the IDF is attacking targets of the oppressive regime, facilities of the Revolutionary Guard, along with the United States military, targeting ballistic missile sites that threaten both Israel and US forces. This operation will continue as long as necessary. In recent months, the tyrants in Iran have been plotting to rebuild their nuclear and missile capabilities and to bury them underground, where we won't be able to strike them. If we don't stop them now, they will become invulnerable. To that end, their representatives in negotiations are trying to buy time, attempting to buy time in fruitless and deceitful negotiations with our American friends. Therefore, we have now launched Operation Lion's Roar, an action that is much more powerful than Operation Rising Lions, which was very powerful. We are doing this in full cooperation with our friends in the United States under the brave leadership of President Trump. Together with the United States, we will strike hard at the terror regime and create conditions that will allow the brave Iranian people to rid themselves of this murderous regime. Whoever lays down their weapon, including among the regime forces, will ensure their safety and secure their future. The Iranian people in all their diversity, Persians, Kurds, Azeris, Balochs, Abkhazians, and all other citizens of this wonderful nation. This is your opportunity to establish a new and free Iran. Take your destiny into your own hands.
Let's take you live to Washington now. Our US correspondent David Blevins joins us. David, a huge step by Benjamin Netanyahu and the US president.
It is, and I have to tell you, Anna, in the last few minutes, our colleagues at NBC here in the United States are reporting that Iran is retaliating against multiple US military facilities in the Middle East. Let me just repeat that. They say Iran is retaliating against what they describe as multiple US military facilities in the Middle East, and they are citing a US official. Nothing from the Pentagon so far on those reports from Bahrain that the US Fifth Fleet base there has been targeted. We know that that base also houses the US Naval Forces Central Command, so a very strategic base indeed. But of course, all of this is reminiscent of the Iran reprisal on the Al Udeid air base in Qatar after Trump launched strikes against their nuclear capabilities about 9 months ago. Now, on that occasion, the ballistic missiles were intercepted, most of them at least, and that prevented a wider escalation. But there is clearly now potential for that. And I think President Trump indicated his awareness of the potential for a wider war and a longer war when he told Americans during that address from his estate in Florida that Americans may be lost in this. So this is a huge gamble for him, a huge risk for the president, especially when he knows his own base is very sceptical about foreign wars, prefers him to focus on domestic matters here in the United States, and that it is a midterm election year. Of course, for a very long time, Americans have been hearing conflicting signals from Donald Trump about Iran. 9 months ago, he told them the nation's nuclear capability had been, in his words, obliterated. He told them just last month that he was going to send help to protesters in Tehran. That help never arrived. Just yesterday, he was suggesting he was prepared to still do a deal with Iran, would prefer not to strike them. And now, without the authority of Congress, there hasn't even been a debate on the issue of Iran there. He has effectively declared war. And there will be many questions being asked on this side of the Atlantic when people waken in the coming hours.
Indeed. David, thanks very much indeed. I just want to bring in some more news coming to us regarding this attack by the US and Israel. The Australian Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese, has said that he supports the US acting to prevent Iran from obtaining nuclear weapons and to prevent Iran continuing to threaten international security. He also says that Australian officials are closely monitoring what he describes as an evolving situation. And he says our ability to provide consular assistance in Iran is extremely limited, and that they've upgraded Australia's travel advice for Israel and Lebanon to do not travel. Also, in the last few moments, Iran's foreign ministry, according to the AP news agency, has said the time has come to defend the homeland after those joint US-Israeli strikes. Well, let's get the view now on what's been a significant morning of events. We can speak now to Dr. Sanam Vakil, who's Director of the Middle East and North Africa Programme at Chatham House now. Very good morning to you. Thanks so much for talking to us this morning. What do you make of the action that's been announced and what we've seen on our television screens already this morning?
Well, good morning, and thank you for having me. This is, by all accounts, and taken directly from President Trump, a regime change operation in Iran that is expected to last not days, but perhaps even weeks. President Trump tried to make the case, I think, albeit a bit late, to the American people that he is trying to address a long-standing, over 4-decade regional, international, and global threat for the American people. And quite interestingly, Israel is, playing junior partner in this campaign. There are a few things that I expect to see in the weeks and months ahead. One, of course, Iran has quite quickly launched a counterstrike. All of the Gulf states practically have been hit. Abu Dhabi, Bahrain, reports of missiles on Qatar, and there are some suggestions that strikes have been launched towards Saudi Arabia. The Iranians are also counter-striking against Israel as well. Iran has no choice but to take this war in a very serious way. It's existential. This is about regime change, and their only strategy is to export this instability and this conflict to the region writ large. That's their only survival strategy right now.
So talk us through what the capabilities of each side are. The US and Israel have outlined their aims. They include, as you say, perhaps they haven't spelt it out in so many words, but it's clear they want the regime to fall. How likely is that to happen? Are they capable of achieving that?
Well, first of all, I think they have made the case for regime change in both of their messages. Prime Minister Netanyahu also choreographed a message alongside President Trump's, and they were explicit that this operation is designed to bring an end to the Islamic Republic and its dangerous behavior. They are finishing the job that they didn't quite finish last summer during the 12-day war. And why we know this, in addition to the fact that the campaign is underway and they are hitting Iranian leadership offices in Tehran, but also military facilities around the country, is they've also called on the Iranian people to, at the end of this military operation, take back the country. So we have to call it as it is, and we have to also call it out as an illegal war.
Yeah, you say you think it's an illegal war. It was clear that Donald Trump was justifying the action, saying that Iran was a threat to the American people. He sort of billed it as a defensive move, essentially, didn't he? What do you make of the justification? You think it's illegal. Explain why.
Well, certainly, the question of legality should be argued out at the United Nations. That institution is no longer seen as the arbiter of legality or war, and that's problematic, and that's reflective of the moment and the order of the world right now. President Trump began yesterday in foreshadowing this war by saying he wanted to rewrite 47 years of dangerous, destabilizing Iranian behavior that has harmed American interests, making clear that Iran had a nuclear program, although the United States buried Iran's nuclear program last summer in the 12-day war, arguing that Iran has an intercontinental ballistic missile program, although intelligence agencies say that that will only be achieved in 10 years. And certainly calling out the Islamic Republic for its dangerous sponsorship of proxy and terror groups across the Middle East. We can talk about this legality, but the reality is, here is where we are. The United States president that campaigned on no regime change, criticized George W. Bush for launching the 2003 Iraq War, has gone in and is launching a regime change campaign against the Islamic Republic, and he's thinking about his legacy and his future. What is unclear is what the Islamic Republic will look like as the war continues, and how the Islamic Republic will reconstitute, if it even can. But also, we don't have real clear answers as to what the United States has up its sleeve for the so-called day after. Are they leaving it to the Iranian people to handle on their own? Or are they going to teleport in some opposition to try and manage what comes next inside Iran?
And we touched on what the US and Israel are capable of achieving. What about Iran and its retaliation?
Well, first of all, I mean, it's very clear that the United States is the most formidable military power in the region. I have no doubt that they are going to try to pummel Iran and destroy what is left of its ballistic missile capabilities, certainly its nuclear program. Iran has quickly launched missiles across the region. We've seen videos of them striking in Haifa. There have been strikes reported in Abu Dhabi. Missiles that have been intercepted in Doha. Bahrain has also been hit. And I've seen some reports that Saudi Arabia has also been struck. Iran's only strategy in this moment, because this conflict is so existential and because it's clear that the U.S. is going for regime change, is to export this conflict and spread this conflict as widely as it can by spreading the pain. That is its only survival strategy, although I also question if this system can indeed survive.
And the appeal that has been put out from both Benjamin Netanyahu and Donald Trump to the Iranian people to rise up against the regime, what do you imagine the response will be of people in Iran who did take to the streets to protest in large numbers a few weeks ago before being brutally repressed? How do you think people there will respond?
Well, I think that Iranians certainly aren't going to come out to protest or to take back their country while these strikes are taking place. I think the call on Iranians to have agency in what comes next is for the so-called day after. But you will have all sorts of opinions in Iran. It's a country of 90 million people. You will have those that are very worried and scared. And the humanitarian consequences of such a war need to also be discussed and digested. People are going to bear the price above all. Hospitals are reportedly full. Many people are going to die. This is going to be painful. But people will also celebrate if Ali Khamenei, Iran's supreme leader, is killed. And certainly, we just have to wait and see. All options are certainly on the table here in this moment.
Well, Dr. Sanam Vakil, we really appreciate your response to what's been going on this morning and your expertise. Thank you very much indeed for your time this morning. Thank you.
Thank you.
I just want to bring in now a statement from the UK government that we've just had in. A government spokesman has said in the last few minutes, Iran must never be allowed to develop a nuclear weapon, and that is why we have continually supported efforts to reach a negotiated solution. Our immediate priority is the safety of UK nationals in the region, and will provide them with consular assistance available 24/7. It goes on to say, as part of our long-standing commitments to the security of our allies in the Middle East, we have a range of defensive capabilities in the region which we have recently bolstered. We stand ready to protect our interests. So that's a statement from the government here in the UK. I'm going to bring in our Defence and Security Editor, Deborah Haynes, now. And Deborah, I don't know if you heard that statement just then from the UK government. And if you did, I wonder what you make of it.
Yes, I saw the statement that was released. I also understand that the UK did not participate in these US and Israeli strikes against Iran. I also understand that Sir Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister, will be chairing a Cobra emergency meeting this morning about the situation. The UK, as in that statement, has in recent weeks bolstered its defences in the region. We've got a large Air Force base in Cyprus, which is within range of Iranian missiles, and the UK deployed 6 F-35 advanced fighter jets to that base. It also deployed Typhoon warplanes to Qatar in recent weeks as well as part of defensive capabilities. But the UK does have only very limited capabilities when it comes to defending against ballistic missiles. That can only be done with the British Royal Navy warships, the Type 45 destroyers. Again, this operation underlining as well the paucity of UK air defence capabilities. But yes, just the important information really is that it's understood that the UK did not participate in these attacks, and the Prime Minister will be chairing a COBRA meeting this morning.
Deborah, thanks very much indeed. Thank you. Well, let's cross to Dubai now. We can bring in our correspondent Sally Lockwood, who's there. And Sally, when we last spoke, there was news coming in all the time of missiles being reported in the wider region. Get us up to date with what the latest is.
Yeah, we've had confirmation from the British Embassy here in the UAE that missiles are flying over, or have been flying over, the United Arab Emirates. That news from the British Embassy in the last hour. We are aware of missiles flying over the United Arab Emirates following escalating regional tensions. British nationals are advised to shelter in place. That advice has also been issued by the American embassy here. Explosions have been heard in Abu Dhabi, and we've also now heard loud bangs here in Dubai as well. It's safe to say that people are very nervous. Children are absolutely terrified. One source in Abu Dhabi said to me, and I've also heard from a local source, that Abu Dhabi has just intercepted a second wave of missiles. That is currently unconfirmed, but I'm hearing that from a local source on the ground in Abu Dhabi, a security source there. And the UAE Ministry of Defence has now confirmed a few seconds ago that air defences have successfully intercepted a number of the missiles launched by Iran on Saturday. The relevant authorities in the country also dealt with debris falling on a residential area in Abu Dhabi, resulting in some material damage and the death of an Asian national. That news just in from the UAE Ministry of Defence. One death in Abu Dhabi following this attack by Iran on Gulf states, including the UAE, where I am today in response to war that has been declared by Donald Trump on Iran. The UAE Ministry of Defence have said that air defences have successfully intercepted a number of missiles, but that debris has fallen on a residential area in Abu Dhabi, resulting in some material damage and the death of an Asian national. That news just in. But I can't quite sum up for you the feeling here today. We have been watching very closely the diplomatic efforts between Iran and the US in recent weeks, knowing just what it could mean for this region if the diplomatic efforts were to fail or Donald Trump were to launch an attack on Iran. Well, that moment has now come, and Iran has issued a statement essentially saying, "We warned you." That post on X today by a member of the Iranian regime, "We warned you. Now you've started down a path whose end is no longer in your hands." And countries that pride themselves on as being some of the safest places in the world to live, such as the UAE, Qatar, and Kuwait, have now reported explosions today and missile attacks by Iran. We've also heard that American military facilities in Bahrain have also been hit today in this apparent retaliation, smoke rising from a US naval base in Bahrain, which is home to the US Fifth Fleet, absolutely critical for naval operations in the Gulf, and in normal times would host around 8,000 to 9,000 American military personnel. It's unclear whether they would have had that number of people there today because, of course, precautions have been taken in recent weeks during this time of escalating tensions. I heard from a military source, that Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar was evacuated of non-essential personnel this morning, that a message came and they were warned to leave the airbase with their protective equipment and with enough items for 72 hours. And of course, there's precedent here. We saw that retaliatory attack last summer after the 12-day war between Israel and Iran, where Iran launched a barrage of missiles at Qatar. It was coordinated, it was choreographed, it was face-saving. No one was killed, there was very little damage. Normal order resumed fairly quickly. This time feels very, very different. And the Iranian regime did warn Donald Trump, did warn America that if they were to launch an attack, if they were to start a war, then essentially it could result in regional conflict, that all American military assets in the region would be legitimate targets. The supreme leader warned that they had the missile capability to sink US warships. And we are now indeed seeing what Iran has been preparing in terms of a response to war. And it's very unclear how long this is going to last and just how significant it's going to be. But certainly here in the UAE today, it's a very, very tense atmosphere indeed. People have been seen running in the streets in Dubai after the sound of loud bangs. This is something that would be unthinkable normally. People are sheltering indoors. And people are very, very nervous. We're going to have to see what today holds, what tonight holds, and certainly it feels like this is a turning point, and think we're entering a very new phase in terms of security in this region.
Yep, Sally, thank you very much indeed. It's Mark Austin here now with what is turning into a very major story. And if you doubted that word from the Israeli military in the last